Chapter 2072. Seeing the change in Gong Zifeng's expression, Feng Zijuan could not help but panic. He had never taken Gong Zifeng seriously in the past. Gong Zifeng even used to bully him. However, he never thought his life and death would end up in Gong Zifeng's hands one day. "Third brother, we're family," Feng Zijuan blurted out anxiously. "Shut up." Gong Zifeng roared furiously. He stared at Feng Zijuan with a ferocious expression and said, "Ask yourself, have you ever treated me as your family?" Feng Zijuan panicked even more. He said, "It's all in the past. Why are you still holding on to it? I swear I'll treat you as my younger brother." "It's all in the past." "No, it's not all in the past. You can let it go, but I can't let it go, let alone forget it. Even now, I still remember the despair and pain my mother felt before she died. And it's all because of Feng Wenhai and the Feng clan. The sins you've committed will never be forgiven." Gong Zifeng roared. His body was filled with resentment while his eyes were filled with murderous intent. Feng Zijuan's body trembled. His face turned pale. What could he do to escape this calamity? "Grandfather, father, mother, sister. Come and save me quick." Gong Zifeng turned to Qin Feiyang and said murderously, "Brother Jiang, let me in." "As you wish." Qin Feiyang smiled and waved his hand. The barrier formed by the force of the rules of order immediately turned into chains that shot forward like poisonous snakes. They firmly bound Feng Zijuan's limbs, preventing him from moving. Gong Zifeng glanced at Feng Zijuan. "Initially, I still had some hope for Feng Wenhai and the rest of you. After all, you're my family. That's why I pleaded for leniency for Feng Wenhai in the square, and asked Big Brother Jiang to let him go. I thought it would move you, but in the end, I realized how wrong I was. I just want to ask you, is it wrong for me to clear my mother's name? I only have a small wish. Why can't you fulfill it? You people are simply too cold-blooded. I'm thoroughly disappointed in all of you. Don't worry, you won't be lonely on the road to the Yellow Springs because soon, Feng Wenhai and the others will accompany you." Gong Zifeng sneered as he walked towards Feng Zijuan. His eyes were bloodshot, and he looked like a mad beast. "No, third brother. These matters can all be discussed. We were wrong in the past. We didn't consider your feelings." Feng Zijun shook his head in panic, feeling extremely desperate. "It's too late. It's too late. I've had enough of these years of humiliation." Gong Zifeng slowly shook his head and walked in front of Feng Zijuan. With a clanging sound, a dagger appeared, flickering with a cold light. "No, I beg you," Feng Zijuan roared. "Go down and accompany my mother in death." Gong Zifeng smiled sinisterly. He raised his dagger and stabbed it into Feng Zijuan's head. "Ah!" A shrill scream resounded in the air above the desert. Feng Zijun's eyes widened in anger as he stared at Gong Zifeng with resentment and roared, "You and Jiang Haoyan will both die a horrible death." Following that, Feng Zijun's head tilted and he died on the spot. However, Gong Zifeng also collapsed on the ground powerlessly. Looking at the blood-stained dagger in his hand, there was a trace of disbelief in his eyes. He actually killed Feng Zijun? It felt like a dream. Do you know? At this time, Qin Feiyang, who had been watching coldly from the sidelines, slowly walked behind Gong Zifeng and said indifferently, "Once I also did this kind of thing, and I killed more than one. My father's sons were almost all killed by me." "Killed all?" Gong Zifeng looked at Qin Feiyang in shock and asked, "After killing them, weren't you afraid?" "Afraid? No. At that time, there was only joy in my heart." Qin Feiyang shook his head. "Joy?" Gong Zifeng muttered. "Am I showing off?" "There is nothing to show off about brothers killing each other. I just want to tell you that since you have already made a move, then you must have the courage to face the other side." Qin Feiyang said. "Thank you," Gong Zifeng said gratefully and stood up. He lowered his head and looked at Feng Zijun's corpse. There was no longer any fear in his eyes. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and said, "Actually, your choice saved your life." "What do you mean?" Gong Zifeng was stunned and looked at Qin Feiyang in puzzlement. "Slowly understand it yourself." Qin Feiyang smiled and controlled the Black Tortoise realm. He quietly left the cave and flew toward the inner sect Deacon Hall. Gong Zifeng lowered his head and carefully pondered Qin Feiyang's words. Suddenly, His gaze trembled as he raised his head and stared at Qin Feiyang. There was a trace of unconcealable fear in his eyes. He finally understood. This time it was actually a test. If he killed Feng Zijun with his own hands, then this person would always help him in the future. But if he chose to plead for Feng Zijun, then this person would kill him and Feng Zijun together. Thinking of this, Gongzi Feng couldn't help but break out in cold sweat. Fortunately, he wasn't soft-hearted just now. Otherwise, he would definitely be a corpse now. After a while, the Black Tortoise realm flew above the inner sect Deacon Hall. Qin Feiyang observed for a while. He only saw Jin Yunchang in the Deacon Hall, and didn't see Frenzy. Then, he directly threw Feng Zijun's corpse on the square of the Deacon Hall. Jin Yunchang, who was sitting in the Deacon Hall, heard the commotion outside and raised his head suspiciously and looked outside. Is it Zijun? When he saw a corpse on the square, his expression suddenly became suspicious and he hurriedly ran out. It's really Zijun. Damn it. Who is it? His divine sense rolled out and covered all directions. But in the void he couldn't find anything, because Qin Feiyang had already left with the Black Tortoise realm. Men, Jin Yunchang roared. The first to rush over were the inner sect disciples below the Deacon Hall. What? Feng Zijun was actually killed. Who on earth is so daring to not only kidnap Feng Zijun, but also kill him and even deliberately send the corpse in front of Jin Yunchang? As more and more disciples came, the place became noisier. Everyone's heart was filled with disbelief. It was one thing to not destroy the corpse after killing someone, but to deliberately send it here. Wasn't this a clear provocation to the Feng family? What a terrifying method. What terrifying courage. Zijun soon. Accompanied by a roar, Feng Yuan and Feng Zihan landed on the square with a murderous aura. Looking at Feng Zijun's corpse, their faces were full of pain. Tell me, who is it? Feng Yuan suddenly landed in front of Jin Yunchang and grabbed his clothes. His eyes were bloodshot as he roared. I don't know. Jin Yunchang shook his head. Trash, trash. Feng Yuan directly slapped Jin Yunchang's face. Jin Yunchang was sent flying on the spot, spitting blood from his mouth. His teeth were all broken, but he did not dare to complain. Swish. Suddenly, another figure landed on the square. It was Lunatic. Looking at Feng Zijun's corpse, Lunatic immediately frowned slightly. Feng Zihan shouted. Lunatic, what are you doing as an inner sect elder? Someone committed murder in the inner sect and you don't even know. Lunatic said angrily. Bitch, don't bite me. Let me tell you, this matter is not over. As an inner sect elder, you can't escape the blame for not protecting your disciples. Feng Zihan snorted coldly. If you had informed me at the first moment, I would indeed be responsible for Feng Zijun's death. But you didn't do so, so it has nothing to do with me. Hurry up and get the corpse away. Don't dirty my territory. Lunatic said with a face of disdain. Hearing Lunatic's words, Feng Yuan was furious and roared, Little bastard, you've gone too far. Bang. Immediately after, he took a step forward and slapped Lunatic with his palm. Swish. But at the same time, Shangguan Fenglan appeared in front of Lunatic out of thin air, raised her slender hand and slapped. Boom. Feng Yuan was forced back a few steps on the spot. Shangguan Fenglan's face was also slightly pale. Obviously, the strength of the two was about the same. Feng Yuan, I can understand your current mood, but what Lunatic said makes sense. After all, you didn't inform us at the first moment, so we didn't have time to investigate. Shangguan Fenglan looked at Feng Yuan and said expressionlessly, Yes, it's our fault for not informing you in time. What about now? When can you find out the real murderer for me? If you can't find out, you don't deserve to be an inner sect elder and the law enforcement hall master. Feng Yuan shouted. It's not up to you to decide whether we deserve it or not. Get the corpse away. As for the real murderer, we will try our best to investigate. Shangguan Fenglan said indifferently. Not try your best, but you must find out, otherwise I won't let you off. Zihan, let's go. Feng Yuan stared at Shangguan Fenglan and said gloomily. Then he shouted coldly at Feng Zihan and turned to leave angrily. Feng Zihan picked up Feng Zijun's corpse, glanced at Lunatic who was standing aside as if it had nothing to do with him, and also turned to leave. This is going to be a big mess. Yes. Feng Yuan's most beloved grandson is Feng Zijuan. If the real murderer can't be found, there will be no end to it. The surrounding disciples were whispering. What's there to see? Get lost. Lunatic glanced around and suddenly shouted. The group of disciples' faces changed, and they immediately dispersed. Jin Yinchang. Lunatic looked at Jin Yinchang again. Elder. Jin Yinchang looked at Lunatic with fear and trepidation. Others have sent the corpse here openly, but you still haven't seen the murderer. Tell me, what's the use of keeping you? Lunatic said. Jin Yinchang looked aggrieved. What did this have to do with him? Feng Yuan was mad at him, and Lunatic was also questioning him. How could he be so wronged? What are you waiting for? Why aren't you going to investigate for me? Everyone in Jiutian Palace, including the disciples on the Heaven List and Earth List, interrogate them for me. If anyone doesn't cooperate, kill them without mercy. Lunatic shouted. Yes. Jin Yinchang responded and hurriedly turned to leave. Chapter 2073. After Jin Yinchang left, Madmen looked at Shangguan Fenglan and frowned. Do you know who it is? Shangguan Fenglan was taken aback, and said coldly. Even you, an inner sect elder, don't know. How would I know? Don't mention this inner sect elder. He just took office and caused such a huge commotion. How unlucky. This person doesn't give me any face. If you want to cause trouble, why can't you wait until I leave office? Madman was rather annoyed. Leave office? I'm afraid it's impossible in a short period of time. Shangguan Fenglan shook her head and also soared into the air, turning into a stream of light and disappearing without a trace. Madman retracted his gaze, lowered his head and pondered. Could this matter be related to Qin Feiyang? Who cares? My mission is to eat, drink and play. Everything else has nothing to do with me. Madman grinned and returned to the duty hall. He lay on the chair and leisurely drank tea and dozed off. The first sacred peak. Cave abode number 1. Inside the Black Tortoise realm. Gong Zongfeng looked at Qin Feiyang and asked worriedly. Will this matter blow up too big? Qin Feiyang sized up the 2 divine artifacts floating in the air, and said with a faint smile. This is the effect I want. Gong Zongfeng shook his head speechlessly. This person was truly unscrupulous in his actions. Following. He also looked at the 2 divine artifacts with a trace of desire in his eyes. With Feng Zijuan's death, these 2 divine artifacts became ownerless, but he didn't know if this person was willing to give them to him? Qin Feiyang laughed. You should know about these 2 divine artifacts. Sky Luo battle armor, dragon drawing sword. They are both peak-level divine artifacts. To be honest, sometimes I am really jealous of Feng Zijuan and Feng Zihan. Gong Zongfeng said. Jealous? Qin Feiyang was slightly taken aback, and said, So Feng Yuan has never given you a divine artifact? He didn't even give me a soul stone. Why would he give me a divine artifact? Gong Zifeng smiled coldly. He waved the dagger in his hand and said, I obtained this dagger through my own efforts. Qin Feiyang glanced at the dagger. Judging from its aura, it was only a high-grade divine artifact that had just given birth to an artifact spirit. Tianluo battle armor, dragon luring sword. Qin Feiyang mumbled to himself. He shook his head and said, I can't give you these 2 divine weapons. I know. It's a pinnacle divine artifact after all. Gong Zifeng nodded, feeling somewhat regretful. Don't misunderstand. It's not because they're peak-level divine artifacts. It's because the Feng family recognizes them. When you take it out, they will immediately know that Feng Zijuan's death is related to you. In other words, these 2 divine artifacts will only do you harm, not good. Qin Feiyang said. His words woke her up from her dream. Gong Zifeng could not help but break out in a cold sweat. He was truly blinded by greed. He did not even think of this point. With a wave of his hand, Qin Feiyang sent the dragon-luring sword and Tianluo battle armor to the castle for Zhao Tailai, and the others to distribute among themselves. Immediately after, Qin Feiyang looked at Gong Zifeng and reminded him, Go back first. During this period of time, don't do anything and try not to contact me. Gong Zifeng was stunned and said in surprise. You mean Feng Yuan and the others might suspect me? I won't rule out this possibility. In short, be careful in the future. Qin Feiyang said. All right. Gong Zifeng nodded. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and brought Gong Zifeng to the living room of the cave. After watching Gong Zifeng leave, he sat on the chair and lowered his head to ponder. Feng Zijuan was dead. Who was the next target? Feng Zihan? He was too strong. Feng Yuan? Even stronger than Feng Zihan. That left only Feng Wenhai and Yin Hui. Wait a minute. He had been in the Nine Heaven Palace for so long and many things had happened. But why hadn't this Yin Hui appeared yet? However, Feng Wenhai and Yin Hui's strength was definitely not to be underestimated. It seemed that he could rest for a period of time and cultivate well. He would think about it after he became stronger. Dong. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Qin Feiyang was stunned. With a wave of his hand, the stone door of the cave opened, and he saw Hui standing at the door with a solemn face. What's wrong with you? Qin Feiyang was suspicious. Hui entered the cave and closed the stone door behind him, asking, Did you kill Feng Zijuan? What did you say? I don't understand. Qin Feiyang was puzzled. Don't pretend. This matter must have something to do with you. This time, didn't you make too much of a fuss? If you want to kill Feng Zijuan, I won't object, but you can't do it in the Nine Heaven Palace. Do you know how big of an impact this will have on the Nine Heaven Palace? Also, Jin Yinchang is now fully investigating this matter, and he will probably find us soon. Hui was annoyed. I also want to kill him outside the Nine Heaven Palace, but he has been holed up in the cave, and I can't find a chance. Qin Feiyang was helpless. You can wait for the chance. Hui rolled his eyes and sat opposite Qin Feiyang, saying, Let me tell you, if this matter is exposed, don't drag me down with you. I still want to live for a few more years. Do you think with our current relationship, I still need to drag you down with me? Qin Feiyang laughed mockingly. Hui's expression stiffened. That was right. If it was really exposed, he would definitely become the target of the hunt. I'm really going to die, because of you. Hui glared at Qin Feiyang and asked, Does Shengguan Fenglan know about this matter? Not only does she know, but she also participated. Qin Feiyang nodded. That's good. Hui breathed a sigh of relief and said, But then again, what do you want the white tiger blood essence for? With Shengguan Fenglan's protection, there shouldn't be a big problem. Qin Feiyang sized up Hui and said, This is your real purpose for coming to find me. Hui smiled embarrassedly. Qin Feiyang shook his head and said with a smile, Shengguan Fenglan also knows. You can ask her, and you can also get close to her while you're at it. You know me the best. Hui chuckled. Qin Feiyang's mouth twitched, saying, You really have feelings for her? Can this matter be joked about? Hui said. Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly and said, Then you have to be careful. This woman is not a good person. Don't end up not only not getting her, but also being used by her. What do you think I am? Am I that stupid? Hui was unhappy. Fine, do as you see fit. Qin Feiyang waved his hand. Anyway, this woman, I have to get her. Hui chuckled, looking extremely wretched, but suddenly he was stunned. He looked up and down Qin Feiyang for a moment and said in surprise, What's wrong with your cultivation? Qin Feiyang hesitated. Hui said, Don't tell me that you're hiding your cultivation again. No. In the past, I was indeed hiding at the perfect war god realm. Didn't I get a lot of soul stones now? That's why I broke through to the perfect war god realm. Qin Feiyang laughed. Who would believe you? But it's not important. Tell me, for a woman like Shengguan Fenglan, how can I capture her heart in the shortest time? Hui asked. How would I know? Besides, this Shengguan Fenglan has status and strength. Think about it carefully, she doesn't lack anything at all. Qin Feiyang said. Wrong. She lacks the love of a man, she lacks the nourishment of love. Forget it. Telling you this is like playing the lute to a cow. I'd better go and find her directly. Hui looked at Qin Feiyang with disdain, then got up and ran out in a hurry. Qin Feiyang shook his head and laughed. He even dared to provoke a woman like Shangguan Fenglan. He had to admit that this guy was really bold. That afternoon, Mu Tianyang really went to challenge the number one person on the Earth board. As Qin Feiyang expected, Jin Fatso didn't come to open the bet. And the result of the challenge was also unquestionable. Mu Tianyang used his overwhelming strength to directly kill the number one person on the Earth board. This battle also made his name known in the Ninth Heaven Palace, making him a popular genius. That night, Jin Yinchang also came to the cave to interrogate Qin Feiyang. Without any evidence, Qin Feiyang wasn't afraid at all and casually fooled Jin Yinchang. As for the Great Elder and Shangguan Fenglan, they acted as if they didn't know about this matter and never came to find Qin Feiyang. And the next morning, another piece of news spread. The recruitment of the Resource Palace was delayed by half a month. When Qin Feiyang received this news, he wasn't particularly surprised. After all, Feng Zijuan had died. Feng Yuan definitely had to deal with his funeral first. Time passed day by day just like that. Qin Feiyang was in the ancient castle, concentrating on breaking through to the half-step Divine Lord realm. Breaking through to the half-step Divine Lord realm wasn't a small matter. After breaking through to the Perfection War God realm, Qin Feiyang's refining speed increased by a lot. Now he could refine about 150 stones a day. But one had to know. To break through to the half-step Divine Lord realm from the Perfection War God realm, one had to refine 100 million spirit stones. 100 million. After careful calculation, to refine 100 million spirit stones, it would take at least 1800 years. Even in the ancient castle, one day was equivalent to a year, so it would take more than 1800 days. After conversion, it would be a full 5 years. In other words, even if he cultivated nonstop in the ancient castle, it would still take him 5 years to refine all 100 million spirit stones. 5 years, what kind of concept was this? For other disciples, 5 years was too short. It would pass in the blink of an eye. After all, compared to more than 1800 years, 5 years wasn't even a fraction. But for Qin Feiyang, 5 years was too long. He regretted taking the Four Symbols Infinite Divine Pill. Because it was too early. He should have waited until he broke through to the Perfection War God realm before taking it. After all, to break through from the Perfection War God realm to the Perfection War God realm, he only needed to refine 10 million spirit stones. The time needed was much shorter. About 270 days, less than a year. In other words, if he didn't take the Four Symbols Infinite Divine Pill now, he would first break through to the Perfection War God realm in less than a year. If he took the Four Symbols Infinite Divine Pill, he would be able to break through to the half-step Divine Lord realm in one go. This would save a lot of time. But there was nothing he could do. Who asked Feng Yuan to raise the requirements to enter the Resource Palace? If he didn't break through to the Perfection War God realm, he wouldn't be able to enter the Resource Palace. Compared to the Resource Palace, cultivation was only secondary. After all, the spirit vein was controlled by the Resource Palace. Moreover, Shangguan Fenglan and the Great Elder were also forcing him to enter the Resource Palace. However, with his example, Zhao Tailai, the Mermaid Princess and the others would wait until they broke through to the Perfection War God realm before taking the Four Symbols Infinite Divine Pill. At that time, they would naturally break through to the half-step Divine Lord realm before Qin Feiyang. Chapter 2074. In the blink of an eye, half a month passed. The people and beasts in the ancient castle had all broken through to perfect war god level. In other words, now except for Dan Wangkai, no one was below perfect war god level. Everyone was working hard. They wanted to step into perfect war god level as soon as possible, so that they could take the Four Symbols Infinite Divine Pill. And outside, during this period of time, there was a lot of trouble. They couldn't find the culprit for a long time, and Feng Yuan had already made a scene in front of the Great Elder. And he would make a scene every 2 or 3 days. What could the Great Elder do? He could only try his best to comfort him. Frenzy was still the same as before, leaving everything to Jin Yinchang. His daily life was very comfortable. This morning, Qin Feiyang was also forced to come out of seclusion. On one hand, Mu Qin came looking for him. On the other hand, Today was the registration day of the resource hall. Inside the cave, Mu Qing took out 4 jade bottles and a qiankuan bag. The 4 jade bottles were the size of half a baby's fist, and they were filled with half a bottle of blood. Inside the qiankuan bag, there were hundreds of jade boxes. So many. Qin Feiyang looked at the jade bottles and jade boxes and frowned. Yes, 100 everlasting divine fruits and 100 drops of blood essence of the 4 divine beasts. Shang Guanqiu asked me to tell you that she hopes to give it to her tonight, and then she will auction it tomorrow. Mu Qing said. Tonight there's still time. But didn't we agree that you will refine the elixirs? Qin Feiyang said. Isn't there no alchemy fire and alchemy furnace? And you also know that refining these elixirs requires at least level 50 mental strength. My ancestor, and I don't have enough mental strength. The most important thing is that Shang Guanqiu specifically asked you to refine it. Mu Qing said. Qin Feiyang frowned. It was indeed recorded in the pill scripture that one needed level 50 mental strength to refine these elixirs. But Shang Guanqiu nodded and asked him to refine it. Wasn't this a bit strange? Why did she ask me to refine it? Qin Feiyang was suspicious. She said that the pills you concocted had more pill veins than the pills we concocted. Naturally, the effects would be better than the pills we concocted. Naturally, the price would be higher. Mu Qing said. I see. Qin Feiyang was suddenly enlightened. Then he sized up Mu Qing and asked curiously, I know about your spiritual power, but what level has Mu Tianyang's spiritual power reached? Mu Qing said, Ancestor's spiritual power will soon reach level 50. Very soon? Qin Feiyang was stunned and asked in surprise, could it be that he also has a secret technique like the soul refining technique? Of course. And it's not just my ancestors. I have one too. Mu Qing smiled proudly. You have one too. Qin Feiyang had an astonished look on his face as he asked, where did you guys get it? Of course he didn't need it, but Dan Wangkai had to have it. Otherwise, even if Dan Wangkai broke through to the War God realm, he wouldn't be able to help him refine these pills, because his spiritual power was far from enough. Mu Qing said, the martial arts treasury of the 9th Heaven Palace. The martial arts treasury? Qin Feiyang was stunned. You still don't know? Mu Qing looked at him in shock. Qin Feiyang shook his head. You are indeed a talent. All the inner disciples have the right to enter the martial arts treasury once. There are all kinds of divine skills in the martial arts treasury, including secret soul techniques like the soul refining technique. Mu Qing said. I see. Qin Feiyang nodded in realization and asked, are there many secret soul techniques in the martial arts treasury? Definitely not many. It all depends on chance and luck. My ancestor went in 6 times and only got 2 secret soul techniques. Mu Qing said. 6 times? Didn't you say that you can only go in once? Qin Feiyang was suspicious. The inner disciples only have 1 chance, but the disciples on the earth board have 5 chances. It adds up to 6 times. Mu Qing said. The disciples on the earth board have such benefits? Qin Feiyang was stunned and asked, what about me, a disciple of the Saint Peak? The disciples of the Saint Peak seem to have 2 chances, and the disciples on the heaven board have more chances. They can go in 10 times. Mu Qing was full of envy and then said, as for the outer disciples, they don't even have 1 chance. 2 chances, Mu Tianyang used 6 times. With my character, 2 times is enough. Qin Feiyang muttered. Do you really think you have a good character? Mu Qing rolled her eyes. She had never seen such a shameless person. Of course. The 4 symbols infinite divine elixir is the best proof. Qin Feiyang smiled proudly and waved his hand. Go back first and come back tonight to pick up the elixir. You must go to the treasure pavilion tomorrow at the auction and see the 4 symbols infinite divine elixir with your own eyes. In case Shang Guanqiu plays tricks. Mu Qing said lightly. My ancestor has already told me about this. You don't have to worry about it. Wait. I don't really trust you either. How about this? I'll ask Fire Lotus to go with you tomorrow. Qin Feiyang pondered for a while and looked at Mu Qing with a smile. Suit yourself. If there's nothing else, I'm leaving. Mu Qing snorted and turned to leave quickly. The martial arts treasury. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed slightly. He got up and closed the stone door of the cave residence. Looking at the jade bottle and Qianquan bag on the table, he shook his head helplessly. To be honest, the last thing he wanted to do now was to refine elixirs. Wait a minute. Mu Qing had left, and Shengguan Qiu was also not here. Then he could totally do something. For example, he could refine 100 pills, give Shengguan Qiu 90 pills, and then say that the other 10 pills were wasted? Good idea. 10 4 symbols infinite divine pellets was a huge fortune. He was immediately energized. He grabbed the jade bottle and Qianquan bag, and walked into the alchemy room. Then he took out the green phoenix cauldron, and the netherworld demonic flame, and started to refine elixirs. He did not go to the ancient castle to refine elixirs, because he did not want to disturb everyone's cultivation. Time passed quietly. At noon, 104 elephants infinite divine pills were finally out of the furnace. After refining for so long, Qin Feiyang could not take it anymore. This was because the 4 elephants infinite divine pills were not like the previous elixirs. Refining the 4 elephants infinite divine pills not only required high concentration throughout the entire process, but also consumed a lot of mental energy. So after half a day, he was also quite tired. But fortunately, none of the pills were wasted. After resting for a while, he sent the green phoenix cauldron and the netherworld demonic flame into the ancient castle. Then he put away the 10 4 elephants infinite divine pills, put the remaining 90 pills into a jade box, and left the cave. Where are you going? Just in time. Hua Yi came back from outside and looked at Qin Feiyang suspiciously. Martial arts treasury. Qin Feiyang said. Martial arts treasury? Hua Yi was slightly stunned and said, I don't think I've been there before. Why don't we go together? Sure. It just so happens that I don't know where the martial arts treasury is. Qin Feiyang said with a smile. The martial arts treasury is even deeper, Hua Yi said with a smile. Then he turned around and flew into the depths. Qin Feiyang followed closely beside him. Qin Feiyang observed Hua Yi along the way. This person would laugh foolishly from time to time. Qin Feiyang asked doubtfully. Looking at you, have you made any progress? What progress? Hua Yi was stunned and turned his head to look at Qin Feiyang suspiciously. Qin Feiyang said, Nonsense, of course, it's about you and Shengguan Fenglan. Her. Hua Yi suddenly smiled, glanced around and whispered, To be honest, there is really a little progress. What do you mean? Qin Feiyang was suspicious. Half a month ago, after I left your place, didn't I go to find her? At first, I thought that she would still treat me coldly like before. But guess what happened? Hua Yi laughed. Anyway, it's impossible for her to have deep feelings for you, Qin Feiyang said lightly. That's definitely impossible. But her attitude has changed for the better. At least when we are alone, she is not as cold as before. Sometimes, I can even see a little smile, Hua Yi said. Is that it? Qin Feiyang was stunned. Otherwise? Hua Yi asked. I thought it was something else. Her attitude has changed a little, and you are so happy. I am really convinced by you. Qin Feiyang pursed his lips. What do you know? Feelings can't be rushed. You have to take it slowly. Now it's because the time is too short. As time passes, it will definitely get better and better. But, when Hua Yi said this, he frowned again. But what? Qin Feiyang was suspicious. Hua Yi sighed deeply and said, She will ask a few questions about your situation from time to time. Ask me? Qin Feiyang was stunned. Don't you understand? She is using my mouth to fish out your details. Maybe her attitude has improved because she wants to find out something from me. Hua Yi sighed. Qin Feiyang said in shock. So you're saying that she's really using you? I don't know. But I am not stupid. When she asks questions that I shouldn't answer, I simply pretend to be stupid. Hua Yi chuckled. Brilliant. Qin Feiyang gave him a thumbs up. Hua Yi shook his head proudly. Then, as if he suddenly thought of something, he looked at Qin Feiyang and said, There is something that we need to discuss. What is it? Qin Feiyang was puzzled. Hua Yi said, For symbols infinite divine pill. You already know? Qin Feiyang said. Hua Yi said, When I went to find Shengguan Fenglan that day, she already told me. Okay. I will give you one. I don't have any more. Qin Feiyang said. Do I look like a greedy person to you? Huai glared at him with dissatisfaction. Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled. He took out a 4 symbols infinite divine pill and threw it to Huai. Huai caught it in his hand, his eyes shining. 9 elixir veins. Amazing, amazing. Right. The registration for the resource hall is today. Are you going? Huai asked. Of course. But it's still early. Let's go to the martial arts treasury first, and then register. Qin Feiyang said. Huai pondered for a moment and said, to tell you the truth, I also want to go. What are you going to do? Qin Feiyang was suspicious. You think you can covet the 9 heavens palace's soul vein? Huai snorted. Sure. Qin Feiyang's face changed. He quickly covered Huai's mouth and looked around vigilantly. He said angrily, are you trying to kill me? Huai also realized that he had said something he shouldn't have. He quickly transmitted his voice. Sorry, it was a slip of the tongue. Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes and let go of his hand. He secretly said, Shengguan Fenglan should be the one who instigated you to go to the resource hall, right? Chapter 2075. I really can't hide anything from you. That's right. Originally, I didn't plan to go, but 2 days ago, when I went to find Shengguan Fenglan, she suddenly mentioned this matter and asked me to go with you. Actually, I know. She just wants me to monitor you. Huai said helplessly. So you agreed? You really value love over friendship. Qin Feiyang despised. How is that possible? Even if I listen to her, we are still good brothers. You can rest assured. I will never betray my brothers for a woman. Huai patted his chest as he solemnly vowed. Come on. In the future, it's better for me to keep a distance from you, lest I have to help you count the money when you betray me. Qin Feiyang said. I'm not happy with what you said. After being together for so long, have I ever betrayed you? Huai said angrily. Who knows what will happen in the future? Qin Feiyang said indifferently. Huai suddenly became annoyed. But at this moment, Qin Feiyang suddenly raised his eyebrows and turned to look at the mountains below. This sudden change caused Huai to be taken aback. He followed Qin Feiyang's gaze, but he didn't find anything in the mountains below. What's wrong? Huai was suspicious. I faintly feel hostility again. Qin Feiyang whispered. Hostility? Huai frowned and looked at the mountains below again. There was indeed nothing. Are you having an illusion? Impossible. This hostility is exactly the same as the last time we entered St. Peak. Qin Feiyang said. Huai was surprised. Could it be that someone is targeting you? I don't know. Qin Feiyang shook his head. Then you have to be careful in the future. Huai secretly warned. Qin Feiyang nodded and glanced at the mountains and rivers below. A glint flashed in his eyes. Then he smiled and said, let's go. The two continued to move forward. About 56 miles away from the St. Peak, there was a wide river. The river was calm and clear. And at a certain place beside the river, there was a black castle. The ancient castle was several hundred feet tall, like a huge mountain, and it exuded a majestic aura. On the gate of the ancient castle, there were 4 bold words carved into it. Martial Arts Treasury. The door was tightly shut. In front of the door, there was a small square. The ground was covered with a layer of green bricks, and traces of weathering could be seen everywhere. In the center of the square, a black-clothed old man sat upright on the ground. His eyes were slightly closed as if he was recuperating from his injuries. Qin Feiyang and Qin Haodong landed on the square. This person is also one of the big shots of our 9 Heavens Palace. He is extremely strong and is in charge of guarding the martial arts treasury. As for his status, he is comparable to Feng Yuan and Shengguan Fenglan. Huai transmitted his voice. Qin Feiyang's pupils contracted. An existence comparable to Feng Yuan and Shengguan Fenglan must not be underestimated. Disciple Huai and Disciple Jiang Haotian greet my lord. The two bowed. The black-clothed old man slowly opened his eyes. Looking at the two, a light flashed in his eyes as he asked, Why have you come to the martial arts treasury? Hua Yi respectfully said. We want to enter the martial arts treasury. Identity token. The black-clothed old man said. The two took out their identity tokens. The black-clothed old man glanced at them and said, You only have 2 chances. You can only choose 1 iron box each time. You can also choose 2 at a time, but you cannot enter the martial arts treasury in the future. Understood. The two nodded. Remember, you are not allowed to mess around in the martial arts treasury, and you are not allowed to steal. Otherwise, no matter who it is, you will be killed without mercy, the black-clothed old man said. Disciple will remember. The two bowed. The black-clothed old man waved his hand and the martial arts treasury's gate slowly opened. He said, Go in. The time limit is 1 hour. Qin Feiyang and Hua Yi took a deep breath and strode into the martial arts treasury. The time limit of 1 hour meant that they could only stay in the martial arts treasury for 1 hour. Once the time limit was up, they had to come out. As soon as the two entered the martial arts treasury, they were immediately dumbfounded. This martial arts treasury was at least thousands of feet in size. Inside, there were rows of iron shelves neatly arranged. And on the iron shelves, there were countless black iron boxes. These iron boxes, regardless of size or appearance, were exactly the same. At a glance, it was unknown how many there were. Qin Feiyang walked to the front of an iron shelf and looked at the dozens of iron boxes on it. His eyes were full of curiosity. Just as he stretched out his hand and was about to grab one of the iron boxes, Hua Yi's face changed. He hurriedly stepped forward and stopped Qin Feiyang. What's wrong? Qin Feiyang was stunned and looked at him puzzledly. You can't take it randomly. Because once you pick it up, the martial arts treasury will automatically judge that you have chosen this iron box and will directly send you out. Hua Yi explained. Hearing this, Qin Feiyang quickly retracted his hand. There is a full hour. There is no rush to choose. Let's take a look first. As Hua Yi walked, he glanced at the iron boxes on the shelf. Can you use divine sense to peek? Qin Feiyang looked for a while and asked. You can try, Hua Yi said. Let's try. Qin Feiyang released his divine sense and rushed towards the iron boxes around him. However, in the next moment he froze. These iron boxes were actually able to block the prying of divine sense. Naive. These iron boxes are all made of hidden soul stone. Divine sense can't peek at all. Hua Yi looked at Qin Feiyang with a sneer. Why didn't you say so earlier? Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes at him and then frowned. The same size, the same shape, and you don't need to use divine sense to peek at them. This is completely dependent on luck. It is dependent on luck. Inside these iron boxes, there are low-grade divine arts and perfect divine arts. It is said that there are even legendary divine arts, but it depends on whether you have the luck to get them. Hua Yi said. Legendary divine art. Qin Feiyang's eyes lit up. So far, other than the 6-word divine art, the strongest divine art he had was the divine dragon art. Peak divine art. Of course, there were also 3,000 incarnations. However, these 3,000 incarnations were a bit special and couldn't be judged by ordinary levels. Time passed in a flash. Half an hour was almost up. The two of them had finished looking through the entire martial arts treasury. I'm too lazy to come in again. I'll just choose 2 at a time. Hua Yi stopped in front of an iron shelf, glanced at the iron boxes on it, and shook his head. It's all based on luck. It doesn't matter, just choose 2 at random. Finished. Hua Yi stretched out his hand and grabbed 2 iron boxes on the 4th row of the iron shelf. And immediately after, an invisible force emerged, and Hua Yi immediately disappeared in front of Qin Feiyang's eyes. Qin Feiyang frowned, retracted his gaze, and glanced at the surrounding iron shelves with a hesitant expression. Which iron box should I choose? If there were more opportunities, it wouldn't matter. But now he only had 2 chances. Just as he was hesitating, the door of the martial arts treasury slowly opened. Didn't Hua Yi's 2 chances have been used up? Qin Feiyang suspiciously turned his head to look at the door, only to find that the person who came in was not Hua Yi, but a black-clothed youth. That person was about 1.8 meters tall, and his body was neither fat nor thin. His thick black hair draped over his back like a waterfall, and his whole body exuded an unfathomable aura. And Qin Feiyang sized up the black-clothed youth. Why did he look so familiar? But he didn't think too much about it. After all, there wasn't much time left. Choosing an iron box was more important. He retracted his gaze and glanced at the surrounding iron shelves, unable to make a decision. The black-clothed youth only glanced at Qin Feiyang for a moment, and then wandered around the martial arts treasury. It was unknown whether it was intentional or not. The black-clothed youth slowly walked to Qin Feiyang's side, sized up the iron boxes on the iron shelves, and suddenly said, "Jiang Haoyan, let's make a bet." Make a bet? Qin Feiyang was slightly taken aback. He turned his head to look at the black-clothed youth suspiciously, and said, "Are you talking to me?" What was going on? He wanted to make a bet with him for no reason. Was he crazy? Yes. The black-clothed youth nodded, but did not turn his head. He continued to scan the iron boxes on the iron shelves. He really is crazy. Qin Feiyang secretly muttered and shook his head. Not interested. Not interested. The black-clothed youth murmured and laughed. I didn't expect that even you, Jiang Haoyan, would not dare to do something. His words were filled with blatant mockery. What do you mean? Do I know you? Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows. You don't know me, but I know you. How about it? Do you dare to make a bet? The black-clothed youth said, still not turning his head. Are you here to pick a fight? Qin Feiyang was startled and asked, what are we betting on? We each choose an iron box and see whose divine art is of a higher grade. As for the bet, it's our lives. The black-clothed youth said. What? Qin Feiyang was dumbfounded. He actually wanted to gamble with his life? Do I have a grudge against you? Other than a deep hatred, there was no other reason to make such a risky bet. That's none of your business. I'm just asking if you dare. The black-clothed youth said indifferently. I don't even know who you are. Why would I bet with you? Qin Feiyang finished speaking and looked away. He was not afraid, but because such a bet was meaningless. Is that all you have? The black-clothed youth's voice sounded again. Just as the voice sounded, Qin Feiyang's body stiffened. He felt that familiar hostility again. Could it be? He suddenly turned around and looked at the black-clothed youth, only to see that the black-clothed youth was staring at him at this moment. His eyes were full of hatred. The hostility I felt the last 2 times was really from you. Who are you? I don't think I've seen you before. Qin Feiyang said in a deep voice. The black-clothed youth said word by word. My name is Nie Kong, Nie Yun's elder brother, the eldest son of the Star River City Lord. Nie Kong. Qin Feiyang was shocked. No wonder he came to gamble with his life. It turned out that he was Nie Yun's elder brother. Obviously, this person wanted to avenge Nie Yun. But why did he choose to gamble with his life in such a way? Even he could not see through this person's cultivation. It was obvious that he was a monarch god expert. A divine lord-level powerhouse could totally formally issue a challenge to him. In this way, the chances of winning would be higher. And gambling like this was simply a matter of luck. Was there something wrong with this person's brain? Chapter 2076. A debt of blood must be paid with blood. You killed my brother and slaughtered everyone in my Nie family. If I don't kill you, I swear I'm not a man. Nie Kong coldly stared at Qin Feiyang. His expression was like that of a wild beast. Wait. It's true that I killed your brother, but the death of others has nothing to do with me. Qin Feiyang frowned. Besides you, who else could it be? Nie Kong said angrily. Your words are a bit unreasonable. Just because I killed your brother, you can't push the blame of the Nie family's destruction to me. Moreover, it was your brother who tried to assassinate me first. I was just defending myself. What's wrong with that? Qin Feiyang said. Nie Kong said angrily. Cut the crap, do you dare to bet or not? I won't bet. Qin Feiyang shook his head decisively. He wasn't so stupid to risk his life with this person. It seems that you're just SOSO. Nie Kong sneered. I'm wondering, why do you have to use this method to bet your life with me? Why don't you challenge me and have a fair fight on the battlefield? Qin Feiyang was suspicious. It was fine if Qin Feiyang didn't say so, but once he said so, Nie Kong was like a raging beast roaring. With madman protecting you, do you think I dare to challenge you? Qin Feiyang was stunned. Now in Ninth Heaven Palace, who doesn't know that you're madman's man? If I challenge you, I'm afraid that before the battle even starts, I'll be charged with a groundless crime and die in his hands. After all, he's now an inner court elder, and has the right to kill us inner court disciples. Nie Kong said helplessly. Qin Feiyang was speechless. Madman helped him because of the original agreement, but he didn't expect it to cause such an impact. In fact, it was a misunderstanding. Madman wouldn't help him in the future. However, such a misunderstanding was also good. With Madman's deterrence, it could save a lot of trouble. Are you a man or not? If you are, then bet with me. Nie Kong shouted. Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows. It seemed that if he didn't agree today, this person wouldn't give up. Qin Feiyang pondered for a while and said, "How about this? Let's change the stakes. It's better for both of us." "What bet?" Nie Kong asked. Qin Feiyang said, "The loser has to run naked for 3 days in the inner and outer sanctum." "All right." Nie Kong nodded and turned to look for the iron box. He really agreed? Qin Feiyang was speechless. One had to know. This was running naked for 3 days, not 3 laps. It could be said that it was more painful than death. Did she really hate him that much? What was done could not be undone. It was too late to regret. Qin Feiyang continued to scan the iron box. He had come to the martial arts treasury purely to try his luck and see if he could find a secret soul technique. However, he didn't expect things to turn out this way. This time, he didn't dare to be careless. He didn't have the face to do something as shameful as running naked for 3 days. But the iron box could block the prying of the divine sense. How could he find it? "Qin Feiyang, do you believe me?" Suddenly, a faintly discernible voice sounded in Qin Feiyang's mind. The Shadowless. Qin Feiyang's heart suddenly rejoiced and said without hesitation, "Of course I believe you." The Shadowless said, "Then go to the left corner." "All right." Qin Feiyang nodded, turned to look at Nie Kong, and walked to the left corner. In the corner, there were more than a dozen iron shelves, with a total of thousands of iron boxes, densely packed. "And then?" Qin Feiyang asked secretly. "The 3rd iron shelf on the right, the 6th row, from left to right the 5th iron box. The 2nd iron shelf on the left, the 3rd row from left to right the 4th iron box. Take these 2 iron boxes and you can leave. Don't get me wrong. This time I helped you, not because of your bet, but purely because I want to use the martial arts treasury to improve your strength. In the future, don't make such a childish bet." The Shadowless said. "Thank you. I will remember." Qin Feiyang said gratefully in his heart. Then he walked to the 3rd iron frame on the right. He looked at the 6th row and counted carefully. Then he grabbed the 5th iron box. Following closely, he took another step and instantly landed in front of the 2nd iron shelf on the left, grabbing the 4th iron box on the 3rd row. As soon as the 2 iron boxes were in his hands, the invisible force shrouded him. The next moment, he disappeared without a trace. So fast. Nie Kong saw this and frowned. Looking at the iron shelves around him, he finally gritted his teeth, grabbed an iron box, and was sent out of the martial arts treasury. Outside, on the square, when Qin Feiyang appeared, Wuxia was looking down at the 2 jade slips in his hand, his brows tightly knitted together. Qin Feiyang glanced at the 2 jade slips and looked at Wuxia with a smile. "Looking at your expression, it seems like you didn't find the divine art you like? It's obvious. Tell me, why am I so unlucky? Not to mention the peak level divine art, the legendary level divine art. At least give me a perfect divine art, right? But these 2 divine arts are not even high-grade divine arts." Wuxia said angrily. "Then what level of divine art is it?" "Mid-grade." Qin Feiyang asked. Wuxia shook his head. "Ugh." Qin Feiyang was stunned and muttered. "Not even mid-grade, could it be a low-grade divine art?" Wuxia nodded bitterly. The corner of Qin Feiyang's mouth twitched. This guy's character was too bad. He reckoned that he was comparable to Mu Tianyang. Huai sighed helplessly and looked up at Qin Feiyang, coldly snorting. Don't gloat, maybe the divine art you took out is worse than mine. Shut your crow's mouth. Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes at him. This was a matter of face, he absolutely couldn't make a mistake. Of course, the Shadowless definitely wouldn't lie to him. But he couldn't relax. What if Niakong's luck was heaven-defying and found a divine art that was better than his? Swish. At this time, Niakong also appeared on the square. Looking at Qin Feiyang, he directly opened the iron box in his hand, and a dazzling divine light suddenly emerged. Looking at the divine light, Niakong's face suddenly had a trace of joy. Looking at the situation, its level is definitely not low. Huai looked at Niakong with envy. Niakong took out the jade slip and sank his divine sense into it. The joy on his face was even stronger. What level of divine art is it? Qin Feiyang muttered. A moment later, Niakong withdrew his divine sense and respectfully handed the iron box to the old man in black, then turned to look at Qin Feiyang, saying, Perfect divine art, you can verify it yourself. Finished. He threw the jade slip to Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang hadn't moved yet, but Huai was one step ahead, grabbing the jade slip and checking it. Gradually, the veins on his forehead gradually bulged. Finally, he suddenly raised his head and roared angrily. Heavens, why are you so unfair? Both of my iron boxes contained low-grade god arts. Yet this person took out a single iron box, and it actually contained a perfect god art. I refuse to accept this. It's really a perfect divine art, Qin Feiyang muttered. Huai withdrew his gaze and lowered his head to look at Qin Feiyang, sighing. Not only is it a perfect divine art, but it's also a soul secret art. A perfect level soul secret art is at least comparable to a peak divine art. What? Soul secret art? Qin Feiyang's gaze trembled, looking at the jade slip in Huai's hand, his heart burning. At this time, the old man in black looked at Huai and said, Wrong, the value of a perfect level soul secret art is comparable to a legendary divine art. Hearing this, Huai's face twitched, looking at the old man in black, frowning. Did he cheat? Otherwise, how could he find such a good divine art? Impudent. The old man in black's face darkened. Huai's face changed, hurriedly saying, I'm sorry, I was confused by anger, I didn't do it on purpose. The old man in black said coldly, My 9 Heavens Palace's martial arts treasury is all based on luck, there has never been any cheating, don't let this old man hear such words again. Yes. Huai nodded. Niakong smiled proudly, looked at Huai, and said, Return the jade slip to me. I'm so envious. Huai sighed, reluctantly throwing the jade slip to Niakong. Niakong caught it in his hand, looked at Qin Feiyang and said, Jiang Haotian, it's your turn. There's something wrong with the atmosphere. Huai looked at Niakong and Qin Feiyang. When Niakong entered the martial arts treasury, he saw it with his own eyes, but he didn't think much about it. But now, looking at the expression and tone of the two, there was something wrong. Could it be that something happened in the martial arts treasury that he didn't know about? Soul secret art, Qin Feiyang murmured, looking down at the 2 iron boxes in his hand. He couldn't help but worry. Even the old man in black said that the jade slip in Niakong's hand was comparable to a legendary divine art. Legendary divine art? Could the 2 divine arts in his hands be compared to it? Hurry up. Don't waste time. Otherwise you can just admit defeat. Niakong joked. With the soul secret art, it was equivalent to having victory in hand. Admit defeat? Huai was stunned. It seemed that something unknown had really happened in the martial arts treasure house. The old man in black also looked at the 2 of them with interest. Qin Feiyang took a deep breath and released his hands. The 2 iron boxes immediately floated in the air. Then he waved his hand, and the lids opened at the same time. Buzz. Wisps of brilliant godly light surged forward like a tide. Looking at this scene, Huai's eyes immediately widened and were filled with disbelief. The old man in black, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground, suddenly stood up and looked at the 2 iron boxes in shock. The smile on Niakong's face gradually disappeared, because the divine light emitted by the 2 jade slips was several times brighter than the jade slip in his hand. But Qin Feiyang didn't relax. After all, the sole secret art Niakong obtained was comparable to a legendary divine art. He stretched out his hand, took out the 2 jade slips, and poured his divine thought into them. A huge amount of information suddenly flowed into his mind. Legendary divine art, soul destruction technique. Legendary divine art, sky trampling 9 steps. What? Qin Feiyang was stunned. It was actually 2 legendary level deity arts. How is it? How is it? Huai asked anxiously. Qin Feiyang took a deep breath, looked at Huai, and said, Soul destruction technique, sky trampling 9 steps, both legendary divine arts. What the hell? Huai's eyes widened in anger. 2 legendary divine arts? What kind of joke was this? This luck was heaven-defying. Chapter 2077. Soul Destruction Technique. Sky trampling 9 steps. At the same time, the black-clothed old man looked at the 2 jade slips in Qin Feiyang's hands and muttered to himself. He was also in disbelief. There weren't many legendary level divine arts in the martial arts treasury. It could even be described as very few. And since the creation of the 9 Heavens Palace, there were no more than 5 people who had obtained legendary level divine arts in the martial arts treasury. But this person actually picked 2 legendary level divine arts at once? What kind of luck was needed in this situation? If he didn't know the martial arts treasury well, he would have suspected that Qin Feiyang had cheated? Niakong was also dumbfounded. Although the soul secret technique in his hands was comparable to the legendary level divine arts, the other party had 2 legendary level divine arts in his hands. The winner and loser of this contest was clear. He lost. However, he didn't want to believe it. To obtain 2 legendary level divine arts at once, this was even less likely than a pie falling from the sky. Let me see. Niakong stretched out his hand and looked at Qin Feiyang as he said in a deep voice. Qin Feiyang smiled and gave it to Niakong. Niakong grabbed the jade slips and sank his divine sense into the 2 jade slips. His face suddenly became sluggish. Huai also leaned forward and used his divine sense to check. There really are 2 legendary level divine arts. Why, this is too unfair. At that moment, he screamed again, his face full of unwillingness. Not to mention Huai and Niakong. In fact, Qin Feiyang also felt like he was dreaming. Although he knew that the shadowless man would definitely not lie to him, he never thought that what he found for him was actually 2 legendary level divine arts. Too unexpected, too pleasantly surprised. The black-clothed old man looked away and looked deeply at Qin Feiyang, saying, Return the iron box to this old man. Yes. Qin Feiyang came back to his senses and quickly handed the 2 iron boxes to the black-clothed old man respectfully. The black-clothed old man took the iron box and smiled hoarsely. You are very lucky, but remember, don't be arrogant and cherish these 2 divine arts. This disciple will remember. Qin Feiyang bowed and said, Yes. The black-clothed old man nodded and returned to his original position. He sat cross-legged on the ground and closed his eyes to rest. Alas! A moment passed. Niakong let out a low sigh and returned the 2 jade slips to Qin Feiyang, saying, I didn't expect that after obtaining the secret soul technique, I would still lose to you. Fate really makes fools of people. It's just that my luck is a little better than yours, Qin Feiyang said with a smile. Can you 2 stop being so sarcastic? Have you considered my feelings? Huai angrily said. Compared to the deity arts obtained by these 2 people, his little bit of harvest was a joke. It couldn't even be considered as trash. However, Qin Feiyang and Niakong ignored him. I'm a man of character. If I say I'll run naked, then I'll run naked. Niakong glanced around and took off his shirt without any hesitation. Wait. Qin Feiyang stopped him. Niakong was suspicious. Let's find a place to talk in private. After Qin Feiyang finished speaking, he soared into the air and flew towards the inner sect. Niakong frowned, put on his clothes and chased after Qin Feiyang. Naked. Huai looked at the 2 of them suspiciously and quickly chased after them. Dozens of breaths later, Qin Feiyang landed on the top of an uninhabited mountain. Niakong and Huai also landed on the mountain peak one after another. Qin Feiyang turned to look at Niakong and asked, Are you a alchemy master? Nie Kong shook his head. Qin Feiyang said. Then how about we make a deal? What deal? Nie Kong frowned. Qin Feiyang said. Give me that secret soul technique, and I'll forget about the matter of running naked for 3 days. Running naked for 3 days? Huai was taken aback. Looking at the two of them, he wondered, what kind of agreement did you make in the martial arts treasury? It has nothing to do with you. Qin Feiyang glanced at Huai, then looked at Nie Kong. The value of the secret soul technique is indeed great, but the consequences of running naked for 3 days is not a trivial matter. Nie Kong's brows furrowed. That's true. If you really run naked for 3 days, I'm afraid you won't have the face to continue staying in Nine Heavens Palace. Huai looked at Nie Kong. Although he didn't understand, Qin Feiyang's goal was obviously the secret soul technique in Nie Kong's hands, so he planned to help Qin Feiyang. He didn't need to do anything else, he just needed to fan the flames from the side. Nie Kong looked at the two of them. His brows furrowed even tighter. Running naked for 3 days, losing all face, a secret soul technique comparable to a legendary grade divine art. How should he choose between the two? Huai continued. Besides, you're not an alchemy master, the secret soul technique is useless. Nie Kong said. I can take it to sell soul stones. Then you have to run naked. It's still a full 3 days. At that time, even if you get a lot of soul stones, you won't be able to erase this shame. Huai said lightly. Nie Kong frowned, hesitating. How about this? I'll give you another 100 million soul stones. In this way, you don't have to run naked, and you can also earn a lot of soul stones. It's the best of both worlds. Qin Feiyang said. 100 million soul stones. Nie Kong was petrified on the spot. 100 million. As soon as he opened his mouth, he was really rich. Take your time to think about it. When you've decided, come to the Saint Peak to find me. After Qin Feiyang finished speaking, he turned and left. Wait. Nie Kong lowered his head and suddenly gritted his teeth, looking at Qin Feiyang's back. Qin Feiyang stopped and turned to look at Nie Kong. Deal. Nie Kong nodded, then took out a jade slip and threw it to Qin Feiyang. It's quite straightforward. Qin Feiyang grabbed the jade slip, checked it a little, and then sent a message to the Fire Lotus in the castle to prepare 100 million soul stones. Soon, 100 million soul stones were ready, and Qin Feiyang handed it to Nie Kong. Nie Kong checked it a little and put it away, then looked at Qin Feiyang and said coldly, the matter between us is not over yet. Anytime, Qin Feiyang said. Humph. Nie Kong snorted coldly, turned around and streaked across the sky like lightning, disappearing. Huai asked suspiciously, Brother Jiang, who is this person? Nie Yun's elder brother, Nie Kong. The hostility I felt the previous 2 times was from him. Qin Feiyang said. So that's how it is. Huai nodded and said, so you guys had a conflict in the martial arts treasury. He was the one who took the initiative to come to me and wanted to bet his life with me. Moreover, he thought that the destruction of his Nie family was related to me. It seems that there will be a lot of trouble in the future. What a headache. Qin Feiyang rubbed his forehead. Trouble was what he was most afraid of. He only wanted to cultivate well, and then look for his ancestor. Why was it so difficult? Huai smiled faintly. Since it's trouble, then it's better to get rid of it as soon as possible. Get rid of it? Why don't you try? Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes at him. How can I be his opponent? Huai laughed embarrassedly. Then why did you say it? Qin Feiyang was speechless. Although Nie Kong had not revealed his cultivation, from the aura he exuded, he was at least a perfect divine lord. An expert of this level was not an ordinary person. Of course, with his current cultivation, it was not impossible for a perfect divine lord to deal with a perfect divine lord, because the 6-word divine arts could ignore large realms. However, if he really fought, it would be hard to predict what would happen during the fight. If he was injured and exposed the purple-gold dragon blood, it would be a disaster for him. Therefore, if he could avoid fighting, he would try his best not to fight. Even if he was forced to fight, he had to find a hidden place. At least there was no third person present. Huai looked at the jade scroll in Qin Feiyang's hand and said sourly, This time you've earned a lot. Not only did you get 2 legendary level divine artifacts, but you also got a secret soul technique. Thinking about it, I can't help but want to strangle you to death. How could you have such good luck? This is something that can't be envied. Qin Feiyang smiled proudly and lowered his head to check the jade scroll. This secret soul technique was called the soul-gathering divine art. After cultivating this technique, one could actively increase the level of their mental strength. But the process was somewhat slow. It was very similar to the soul refining technique. But it didn't matter. Anyway, one day in the ancient castle was equivalent to 1 year. After Dan Wangkai broke through to the war god realm, it wouldn't be long before his mental strength would break through to level 50. After putting away the jade scroll, Qin Feiyang took out an image crystal and sent a message to Mu Tianyang to go to the resource hall to register. Then he flew towards the resource hall with a face full of joy. Sigh. Normally, I haven't done anything that offends the heavens and reason. Why is my character so bad? Huai followed beside Qin Feiyang with a face full of grief. 9 Heaven Palace. Deep in a courtyard. What? 2 legendary level divine arts. Are you sure you didn't make a mistake? Great Elder and Shangguan Fenglan stood together, looking at a figure in the void in front of them. Their faces were filled with shock. That figure was the black-clothed old man guarding the martial arts treasury. I knew that you wouldn't believe me, but I saw it with my own eyes. The black-clothed old man smiled bitterly. How could this be? The first time he entered the martial arts treasury, he got 2 legendary level divine arts. He couldn't have done something, right? Shangguan Fenglan said. This kind of thing could be described as a miracle. It was really hard to accept. Tampering? The black-clothed old man smiled helplessly and said, You all know the situation in the martial arts treasury. There is no possibility of tampering. It can only be said that his luck is too good. The Great Elder asked, Then what 2 divine arts did he get? The black-clothed old man said, Soul Destruction Technique, Sky Trampling 9 Steps. What? The Great Elder's face was full of shock. Shangguan Fenglan was also shocked and muttered, These 2 divine arts were left behind by the first-generation palace master of our 9 Heaven Palace. Speaking of which, Shangguan Fenglan looked at the Great Elder and said, This child obtained these 2 divine arts at once. Does this mean that he has already obtained the recognition of the first-generation palace master? The recognition of the first-generation palace master. The black-clothed old man glanced at Shangguan Fenglan and lowered his head to ponder. The first elder was silent as well. The scene fell into a deathly silence. After an unknown amount of time, the Great Elder let out a long breath and looked at the black-clothed old man with a smile. This old man and Fenglan still have some things to discuss. That's all for now. All right. The black-clothed old man nodded, and the shadow quickly dissipated. Chapter 2078. After the black-robed old man's silhouette dissipated, the Grand Elder withdrew his gaze and sat on the chair, saying, Fenglan, you seem to have told this old man that this child in Mu Tianyang had researched a kind of 4 symbols infinite divine pellet? Yes. Shangguan Fenglan nodded and said, I saw it with my own eyes. After Mu Tianyang took this pill, he broke through to the perfection war god realm. Then why didn't you ask for the pill formula? The Great Elder was suspicious. Shangguan Fenglan was stunned and hurriedly said, First Elder, this isn't appropriate, right? After all, the 4 symbols infinite pill was painstakingly researched by them. If we do this, wouldn't it be forcing them against their will? As disciples of 9 Heaven Palace, they have the responsibility and obligation to contribute to our 9 Heaven Palace. The Great Elder laughed. This, Shangguan Fenglan frowned. Obviously, the Great Elder was determined to get the pill formula of the 4 symbols infinite divine pill. Of course, our 9 Heaven Palace will not take their pill formula for free. The Great Elder said again. What do you mean? Shangguan Fenglan asked carefully. The Great Elder said, Make an exception and let them enter the purple gold divine pagoda to cultivate and give them 100,000 soul stones every month. Enter the purple gold divine pagoda? Great Elder, this is a treatment that only disciples of the heaven list have. Moreover, There are people on every floor of the purple gold divine pagoda. We can't chase out the other disciples of the heaven list just because of them, Shengguan Fenghuan said. There were only 10 floors in the purple gold divine pagoda, and they were occupied by the 10 disciples of the heaven list. In other words, the current purple gold divine pagoda did not have any extra caves. If Qin Feiyang and Mu Tianyang were to enter the purple gold divine pagoda, then they would have to chase out the 2 disciples of the heaven list. If Qin Feiyang and Mu Tianyang's strength had already reached the level of disciples of the heaven list, then it was nothing. However, the 2 of them were only perfection war gods, not even half-step divine lord. Would others be convinced? There is no need to chase them out. How about this? Let the 2 of them live on the same floor. Wouldn't that make one floor empty? The great elder laughed. 2 people living on the same floor? Shengguan Fenghuan frowned and said, Great elder, our 9 heavens palace has never had such a precedent. The great elder said, Rules are dead, but people are alive. We must know how to be flexible. All right, I'll ask them first. After all, this kind of thing can't be forced. We have to get their consent first. Shengguan Fenghuan said. They will agree. After all, the purple gold divine pagoda contains a time array. It's a place that all disciples dream of. The great elder smiled confidently. That's true. Shengguan Fenghuan nodded. The great elder said, Actually, this old man is doing this to nurture them. Nurture them? Shengguan Fenghuan was stunned. What do you think? Do you know how everyone will talk about me behind my back if I let 2 disciples who aren't even divine lords enter the purple gold divine pagoda? This old man is under a lot of pressure at most. But there's nothing we can do about it. Who told Jiang Haoyan to be recognized by the first-generation palace master? The great elder sighed. Shengguan Fenghuan said in surprise, Listening to what you said, do you want to nurture him as the next palace master? The great elder was stunned and said with a wry smile, You're exaggerating. Which of the top 10 disciples on the heaven list isn't a talented person? He has no chance to be the next palace master's successor. Shengguan Fenghuan was stunned and couldn't help but laugh at herself. That's right. Although Jiang Haoyan's attainments in alchemy were extremely high, his strength was still far from a true disciple on the heaven list. And as the palace master of the 9 heavens palace, strength was actually the most important thing, and alchemy was only secondary. Because if one didn't have enough strength, then they wouldn't have the ability to let the 9 heavens palace stand on the territory of the northern region forever. Resource Hall. Outside the square. At this moment, tens of thousands of people were gathered, all of them inner disciples. Among them, there were even disciples from the top 10 St. Peaks. Naturally, they were all here to sign up. And in the center of the square, a golden-robed fatso sat majestically on a chair. 2 little followers stood respectfully by the side. This person was Jean Fatso. In front of Jean Fatso, there was a table. On the table, there was a booklet. The names of those who signed up would be recorded in the booklet. Jean Zhou, Perfect Circle War God. A black-clothed young man said as he strode forward with a grim expression on his face. Yes. Jean Fatso nodded. After recording the name, he raised his head and looked at Jean Zhou with a smile in his eyes. Jean Zhou also smiled knowingly, and then retreated to the side. Look. It's Mu Tianyang. He actually came too. This guy is also a ruthless person. Yeah. Half a month ago, he went to challenge the number 1 person on the Earth list. At first, no one was optimistic about him. But in the end, the number 1 person on the Earth list didn't even have the strength to fight back in front of him. He's the same as Jiang Haoyan. He just entered the 9 heavens palace not long ago. I didn't expect him to reach the top of the Earth list. How terrifying. The crowd suddenly became restless. Everyone turned around and saw a youth in purple robes with his hands behind his back. He walked in the air step by step. Who else could it be but Mu Tianyang? Although he restrained his natural emperor aura, he was still like a bright star that made people look up to him. Shua. Mu Tianyang stepped onto the plaza. Greetings, senior brother Mu. Many people immediately bowed and saluted. Although the disciples on the earth list couldn't be compared to the disciples on the heaven list, they still had a lot of prestige in the nine heavens palace. Especially the number one person on the earth list. Mu Tianyang smiled faintly and walked in front of Jin Fatso saying, Mu Tianyang, perfect circle war god. Jin Fatso was stunned. What's wrong? Mu Tianyang smiled and asked. Jin Fatso said, You're already the number one person on the earth list. Your treatment is much better than the resource palace. Why are you still here to sign up? Is there a rule that the number one person on the earth list can't enter the resource palace to work? Mu Tianyang asked. No. Jin Fatso subconsciously shook his head. Then I can't. Mu Tianyang smiled faintly and walked to the side. He crossed his arms in front of his chest and remained silent. That outstanding temperament was like a crane in a flock of chickens. Jin Fatso regained his senses and hurriedly memorized Mu Tianyang's name. But in his heart he was puzzled. Previously, when he met Mu Tianyang's gaze, he couldn't help but feel a sense of panic. One must know. His cultivation was higher than Mu Tianyang's. Why would he have such a feeling? Look. It's Jiang Haotian. And Huai. Why are the two of them here too? Not long after. The crowd became restless again. Mu Tianyang finally reacted. He looked at Qin Feiyang, and a smile appeared on his face. Hello, senior brother Jiang. You're here too. When Qin Feiyang landed on the square, the disciples came forward to compliment him. Once a person became famous, his status would naturally be different. What's more, everyone now thought that Frenzy was Qin Feiyang's backer, so they were even more polite. Qin Feiyang didn't put on any airs and greeted them with a smile. However, a cold glint flashed in Fatty Jin's eyes without leaving a trace. On the surface, however, he still maintained a friendly and amiable appearance. He stood up and smiled. Brother Jiang, you've also come. Senior brother Jin, am I not welcome? Qin Feiyang smiled. No. Jin Fatso waved his hand repeatedly. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed with a touch of ridicule inside. Senior brother Jin, you're not keeping your promise. Not keeping my promise? Jin Fatso was taken aback and asked suspiciously. Junior brother Jiang, why do you say that? Last time, didn't you say that you wanted to be a peacemaker and invite me and senior brother Feng Zijuan to the Jade Zither house for a few drinks and forget about our enmity? I've been waiting for it, but I didn't get an invitation from senior brother Jin. Now that senior brother Feng Zijuan has been assassinated, I don't even have the chance to apologize. Qin Feiyang sighed. So it's about this. Jin Fatso muttered and sneered in his heart. This was just a polite remark at that time. He didn't expect this person to take it seriously. Yes. It's my fault. I've been too busy during this period and forgot. I hope junior brother Jiang can forgive me. But what is junior brother Jiang doing here today? Don't tell me you're also here to sign up? Jin Fatso said. Yes, I'm here to sign up. Qin Feiyang nodded. This. Junior brother Jiang, you shouldn't be clear about the rules, right? This registration requires the cultivation of a perfect war god. You as a perfect war god are still a little lacking. Jin Fatso said with some difficulty. That's right, senior brother Jiang. This rule was announced a long time ago. Didn't you see it? The surrounding people also followed. Qin Feiyang looked around and laughed. Who said that I'm a perfect war god? Finish speaking. His aura suddenly exploded. What? Perfect war god? Jin Fatso was stunned. How was this possible? Half a month ago, didn't he just break through to the perfect war god? The surrounding crowd also rubbed their eyes in disbelief. When he first arrived at the Nine Heaven Palace, this person was still a low-level war god. How long had it been? He actually broke through to the perfect war god? Did he eat some kind of miraculous pill? How could it be so fast? Qin Feiyang laughed. To be honest, I've been hiding my cultivation. My true cultivation has always been at the perfect war god. So it's like that. I told you it's impossible to be so fast. I didn't expect senior brother Jiang to still be hiding his strength. Everyone came to a sudden realization and smiled flatteringly. You flatter me. Compared to senior brothers and sisters, my cultivation is still far from enough. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and looked at Jin Fatso. He smiled and said, "Senior brother Jin, can I register now?" Sure. Jin Fatso regained his senses and nodded repeatedly. He remembered Qin Feiyang's name. Hui, perfect war god. Hui also spoke. You're also a perfect war god. Jin Fatso was stunned. That's right. I used to hide my cultivation too. Hui grinned and also released his aura. He was indeed a perfect war god. Actually, the situation was like this. On the way here, he entered the Black Tortoise realm and took the 4 symbols infinite divine pill that Qin Feiyang gave him. Then he successfully broke through to the perfect war god. This was also the reason why he asked Qin Feiyang for the 4 symbols infinite divine pill. After all, the requirement to register was to be a perfect war god. If he didn't have the 4 symbols infinite divine pill, he wouldn't have been able to break through to the perfect war god before registering. Chapter 2079. Jin Fatso was dumbfounded. If they were all hiding their cultivation, then what was the point of raising the registration requirement? Wasn't this equivalent to working for nothing? Hui asked, "Senior brother Jin, is it okay?" "Of course." Jin Fatso quickly nodded and said with a smile, "As long as you meet the requirements, you can register." Hui smiled and retreated to Qin Feiyang's side. After Jin Fatso memorized the names, he looked at Qin Feiyang, Mu Tianyang, and Hui and suddenly felt a headache. Hui had always been very low-key, but Jiang Haoyan and Mu Tianyang were both difficult to deal with. Now that they were gathered together, how was he going to deal with them? Next, Fatty Jin sighed inwardly as he looked at the crowd and shouted. Hui smiled and said, "This Jin Fatso is a typical person who hides a knife in his smile. He's just a small character. I just want to know what expression Feng Yuan will have when he learns that our registration is successful." Qin Feiyang thought, "It will definitely be wonderful. But we can't be careless. This is just the registration, the real assessment is still behind. I guess Feng Yuan will definitely do something during the assessment." Mu Tianyang said. "Makes sense." Hui imperceptibly nodded his head. He suspiciously looked at Qin Feiyang and Mu Qin, and inwardly said, "Brother Jiang, Brother Mu, what's the situation with you two?" "What?" Qin Feiyang and Mu Tianyang looked at each other, and looked at Hui suspiciously. "I remember when you entered Nine Heavens Palace, you were like sworn enemies. But now you're working together to deal with Feng Yuan. Your relationship has become a bit exaggerated," Hui said. Mu Tianyang smiled and said, "In this world there are no eternal enemies, only eternal interests. So that's how it is." Hui suddenly smiled. Mu Tianyang's eyes flickered as he transmitted his voice. "Brother Hua, actually, you're making me very puzzled as well." "Me?" Hui was stunned. "I've never believed that there are good people in this world. And aren't you treating Jiang Haoyan too well? To put it bluntly, you're taking the initiative to get close to me." Mu Tianyang thought to himself. "It's a misunderstanding. I'm just a nameless little mouth. Why would I try to get close to you? Brother Jiang and I only got together because we hit it off." Hui laughed. "Kindred spirits," Mu Tianyang muttered. He shook his head and smiled noncommittally. Then he said to himself, "Speaking of which, why do I feel a familiar aura from your body?" "What?" Qin Feiyang's eyes trembled slightly. Mu Tianyang also had this feeling? Familiar? Hearing that, Hui was slightly startled. He laughed in his heart and said, "That might be because my appearance is too ordinary. That's why I gave you a sense of familiarity." "Is that so?" Mu Tianyang murmured. A light flashed in his eyes. Hui didn't speak again. He looked at the people who signed up. Qin Feiyang glanced at Hui and said, "Mu Tianyang, do you really feel a sense of familiarity from Hui?" "Yes," Mu Tianyang secretly replied. "When we first met, I also had this feeling. It's because of this feeling that I want to know more about him," Qin Feiyang secretly said. "What?" Mu Tianyang raised his eyebrows and looked at Hui again. His eyes were full of surprise. If only one of them had this feeling, then it could be said to be an illusion. But now, if both he and Qin Feiyang had this feeling, then this matter was worth investigating. This Hui, who exactly was he? Did they really hit it off? Or did he mean to get close to Qin Feiyang? Hurry up, hurry up. After the evening, the registration will stop and the official assessment will begin. Jean Fatso urged. The official assessment will only start in the evening? Mu Tianyang was stunned. He looked at Qin Feiyang and Hui and smiled. Brother Hua, Brother Jiang, why don't we go and have a few drinks? Sure. Hui nodded. If you want to go, you can go. I'm not interested. Qin Feiyang shook his head. So boring. Mu Tianyang and Hui cast a look of disdain at Qin Feiyang at the same time. Qin Feiyang turned a blind eye. Mu Tianyang pursed his lips and looked at Hui with a smile. Then Brother Hua, shall we go? Let's go. I also wanted to get to know you better. Hui nodded and smiled. Wait. Seeing that the two were about to leave, Qin Feiyang stopped them and asked, Where are you going to drink? Mu Tianyang said, Jade Orchid Pavilion, Jade Zither Pavilion, anywhere is fine. Since we're going to Sky Dragon City, give this to Shengguan Qiu. Qin Feiyang took out a universe bag and threw it to Mu Tianyang. Mu Tianyang grabbed it and glanced at it suspiciously. He asked in surprise, so fast. Inside the universe bag were the 94 symbols infinite divine pellets. Is it fast? Qin Feiyang shook his head disapprovingly. Mu Tianyang looked at it again and raised his eyebrows. He transmitted his voice. Wait, this number doesn't seem right. 10 of them are scrapped. Qin Feiyang said with shame. Scrapped? Or 10? This? Mu Tianyang was stunned, and then looked at Qin Feiyang meaningfully. He transmitted his voice. Brother Qin, with your skill in alchemy, it seems a bit exaggerated to scrap 10 of them at once. What do you mean? Do you mean that I have to be 100% successful when refining elixirs? Qin Feiyang said to himself, looking a little angry. That's not what I meant. Don't misunderstand. I just find it unbelievable. After all, the first few times I refined them, they were not scrapped, and then so many more were scrapped. Mu Tianyang said to himself. Qin Feiyang said unhappily. Even horses have times when they stumble, let alone humans. Okay. Mu Tianyang nodded and smiled. Okay, I'll pass it to Shengguan Qiu later. As soon as he finished speaking, he gave Hui a meaningful glance. And then he turned around and left. Qin Feiyang heaved a sigh of relief. This Mu Tianyang was not so easy to fool. He glanced at the people in the square and did not hide, directly entering the castle. The white-eyed wolf immediately pounced and said, Show me the legendary level divine skill you got from the martial arts treasury. Get lost. Qin Feiyang slapped the white-eyed wolf. The white-eyed wolf immediately howled and crashed into the wall. It was in so much pain that it grimaced. You're always so troublesome. Look at old Zhao and the others, they're so calm. Before Qin Feiyang could finish speaking, his expression turned to one of astonishment. That was because he discovered that Zhao Tailai and the others were also staring straight at him. Their eyes were emitting green light. Was this calmness? They were obviously eyeing him covetously. Qin Feiyang could not help but smile bitterly. After all, it was a legendary level divine skill. Who would not want it? Calm down. If it's suitable for you, I'll definitely give it to you. Qin Feiyang said helplessly, then sat down cross-legged on the ground, took out the 2 jade slips, and carefully looked at them. Soon, a trace of shock crept onto his face. This soul extermination technique was actually a super killing technique that could ignore the physical body and directly erase the divine soul. Moreover, even with the protection of the divine artifact, it could not block it. In other words, the soul extermination technique could ignore all defenses and directly attack the divine soul. This was just like the undead power of the fire lotus. And the 9 steps in the sky was even more astonishing. Not only could it increase one's speed, it also had a terrifying lethality. In other words, this was a supreme divine technique that combined both support and killing into one. Taking a step out, the ground cracked. Taking a step out, the sky collapsed. Each step was more terrifying than the last. When the 9th step was taken, it would be the strongest state of the 9 steps in the sky. Enough to destroy heaven and earth. Shadowless, Thank you very much. Qin Feiyang muttered. How is it? Everyone looked at Qin Feiyang expectantly, especially the white-eyed wolf, whose saliva was about to flow out. I want to cultivate the soul extermination technique myself. As for this 9 steps in the sky, I have the step formula. If I were to cultivate it, it would be a waste. Qin Feiyang muttered to himself as he spoke. I. The white-eyed wolf shouted anxiously. Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes at it, looked at the mermaid princess, and said with a smile, I'll give it to you. Give it to me? The mermaid princess was stunned. She never thought that Qin Feiyang would give it to her. I protest. You are clearly playing favoritism. The white-eyed wolf roared angrily. Cough cough. Young master, you can't forget your friends. Tang Hai coughed dryly and said. Qin Feiyang's face darkened as he said angrily. I was the one who got the divine arts. It's my freedom to give it to whoever I want. Do you have any objections? I wouldn't dare. Tang Hai waved his hand and looked at the white-eyed wolf, Zhao Tailai and the others. He said angrily, Stop fooling around. Is it wrong for the young master to give the divine arts to his wife? That's right. Zhao Tailai and the others hurriedly shook their heads. Come on. Do you think I don't know what you're thinking? Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes at them, got up and walked to the mermaid princess, and said with a smile, Take it. The mermaid princess was at a loss. She looked at everyone and said, You should give it to them. I'm not going out to fight anyway. It's a waste to give it to me. Are you stupid? Qin Feiyang glared at the mermaid princess and forced it into her hands. He sighed and said, If what Dong Zhengyang said is true, then those of us who have activated the heaven-defying fighting soul will not have a good ending. So now, if you have the chance to become stronger, you should do your best to avoid being a burden to everyone in the future. All right. Hearing this, the mermaid princess hesitated for a moment and nodded in agreement. Hearing Qin Feiyang's words, the white-eyed wolf, Tang Hai, and the others fell silent. Was what Dong Zhengyang said true? Don't worry. If there's a chance, I'll find one for you. But I still hope that you can work hard to improve your current divine skills, or create a new one. After all, a divine skill that you've comprehended or created is the most suitable one for you. Qin Feiyang looked at Zhao Tailai and the others and said, Yes. Everyone nodded. As for you, the white-eyed wolf, didn't you say that after becoming a god, you've obtained a lot of good fortune? Qin Feiyang looked at the white-eyed wolf and asked. Yes. But does it have anything to do with you? The white-eyed wolf snorted and lay on a pile of soul stones to cultivate. The corner of Qin Feiyang's mouth twitched. Under the white-eyed wolf's body, there were at least tens of thousands of soul stones. Using soul stones as a mattress was really extravagant. However, he was really curious about the good fortune that the white-eyed wolf obtained when he became a god. Chapter 2080. In the blink of an eye, evening fell. The number of people in the square was less than half of what it was at noon. Because the people who came to join in the fun had already left, the rest were basically disciples who had signed up. Jean Fatso put down the pen in his hand and shouted, Okay, the registration is over. Those who did not sign up, quickly leave. A few people turned around and left in disappointment. At this time, there were about 3,000 people in the square. It was also at this time Qin Feiyang appeared out of thin air. His entire person looked refreshed and energetic. Although only an afternoon had passed outside, several months had passed inside the castle. Not only had he already adjusted his state, he had even comprehended the soul destruction technique. Jean Fatso looked at Qin Feiyang. He did not see Mu Tianyang and Hua Yi beside Qin Feiyang, and his eyes immediately flashed with a flash of light. After 10 breaths of time, if the person who signed up has not arrived, they will also be disqualified. Obviously, this was aimed at Mu Tianyang and Hua Yi. Time passed by breath. Seeing that 10 breaths of time was almost up, Jean Fatso was about to announce when 2 voices suddenly sounded. Wait! We're here. Before the voice had faded, 2 silhouettes streaked across the sky like lightning and landed beside Qin Feiyang. It was Hua Yi and Mu Tianyang. Both of them reeked of alcohol. When the others saw this, they were quite speechless. At this time, they actually went to drink? Jean Fatso raised his eyebrows and said, "Those who have not arrived yet will be disqualified. Now, I will talk about the rules of the assessment. First, during the assessment, no outsiders are allowed to help. Second, listen to the examiner's orders. Third, without the consent of the examiner, you cannot leave without permission. If there is a violation, you will be disqualified. As for the examiner, it is me." Jean Fatso glanced at the audience with an arrogant and overbearing attitude. Mu Tianyang glanced at Golden Fatso and said to himself, "Look at this person. He's showing the profundity of a dog relying on its master's power to the fullest." Hua Yi said, "There's nothing we can do about it. After all, he has this faction behind him." Qin Feiyang said in his heart, "You guys went drinking, did you have a good time?" "Awesome, awesome. Brother Mu and I, it's a pity that we didn't meet sooner." Hua Yi laughed. "Yeah, we almost became sworn brothers." Mu Tianyang laughed inwardly. "Hypocrite." Qin Feiyang gave a flattering smile in his heart and sent a voice transmission to Mu Tianyang. "Did you see anything? What are you looking at?" Mu Tianyang looked at him suspiciously. "Still pretending? Didn't you ask him out for a drink because you wanted to take advantage of the alcohol to find out more about him?" Qin Feiyang said in his heart. Mu Tianyang was stunned and said with a wry smile, "Sure enough, nothing can be hidden from your eyes." "Then what is it?" Qin Feiyang asked. "This person is very shrewd. He's watertight." Mu Tianyang sighed inwardly. The meaning was obvious. He got nothing. "Sure enough." Qin Feiyang murmured, not surprised at all. Mu Tianyang said, "Let's not talk about him first. Let's talk about you. This time, your luck is really heaven-defying." "You already know?" Qin Feiyang was suspicious. "Hua Yi told me. 2 legendary level divine arts, and a soul secret technique comparable to a legendary level divine art. It's really enviable." Mu Tianyang's current mood could only be described with one word: tired. Originally, Qin Feiyang was already very difficult to deal with. Now he had 2 legendary level divine arts. Wasn't this equivalent to more difficult? At this moment, he even had the thought of giving up. Why not just give up? Anyway, he couldn't win, so why bother to fight? How easy and pleasant it would be to get along as friends. Jean Fatso glanced at the audience and shouted, "I have already explained the rules. If anyone has any objections, say it in advance." Everyone shook their heads. "That's good. Now let's begin the first assessment. In this first level, there are 2 multiple-choice questions. You have 3 breaths of time to consider each question. But after 3 breaths, you must make a choice, otherwise you will be considered to have given up. The first question, Soul Stone or Divine Crystal, which is more important? Those who choose Soul Stone stand on the left. Those who choose Divine Crystal stand on the right. Begin. As soon as Jean Fatso's voice fell, most people ran to the left without hesitation. Because this question was too simple, there was no need to think about it. Soul Stone and Divine Crystal. As long as one was not a fool, they would know that the Soul Stone was definitely more important. But there were also some people who stood in place, hesitating. Among them, Qin Feiyang and the other 2. It was because this question was too simple that they were confused. After all, this was an assessment. How could there be such a simple question? What kind of mystery was hidden in this? But there were only 3 breaths of time. There was no time for them to think too much. The rest of the people also made their choice one after another. Basically, they all ran to the left. There were also a small number of people who, with a fluke mentality, chose the Divine Crystal more important and ran to the right. "What should we choose?" Qin Feiyang secretly asked. This time he really could not make up his mind. "Follow them. We will do what they do." Mu Tianyang glanced at the 6 young men and women next to him. These 6 people, like Qin Feiyang and the other 2, also did not make a choice. Qin Feiyang glanced at the 6 people, his heart full of doubts. Why should he follow them? "I knew it." "You didn't do your homework in advance. Do you see that young man in black in the middle? His name is Jin Zhou, the son of Jin Yunchang's cousin. He is also Jean Fatso's cousin. So the content of the assessment, Jean Fatso must have already told him. As for the other 5 people, although I have not investigated, they must be familiar with Jean Fatso. Mu Tianyang transmitted his voice. So that's how it is. Qin Feiyang suddenly understood. Jin Zhou, what's the matter with them? Why are they also motionless like us? Could it be that they have also received the inside information? Those people also noticed the situation of Qin Feiyang and the other 2, and secretly muttered. Impossible. Only I know this inside information. Jin Zhou secretly said. At the same time, Jean Fatso glanced at Qin Feiyang and the other 2, raised his eyebrows and shouted. 3 breaths of time. Jin Zhou and the other 2 still did not move. The 6 people did not move. Qin Feiyang and the other 2 also did not move. Someone immediately asked. Brother Jin, Jiang Haotian and the others have no choice. Should they be eliminated directly? Don't worry. I will announce the result soon. Jean Fatso glanced at the audience and said. Whether it is the people who choose the soul stone or the divine crystal, all of them will be eliminated. What? The people on both sides suddenly became a mess. What's going on? What we want the most is the soul stone. Isn't that important? And the divine crystal. Now where do you want to go? Don't you want the divine crystal? Now we are all eliminated. How can there be such a thing? There must be one side that is right. The square was noisy, and everyone's face was full of dissatisfaction. Quiet! Jean Fatso shouted. Brother Jean, although you are the examiner, you can't act recklessly. You must give us a satisfactory answer. Besides, if we are all eliminated, then this recruitment of the resource palace is purely making fun of us. Thousands of disciples glared at Jean Fatso, who said all of them will be eliminated. The 9 of them passed the first round of assessment. Jean Fatso pointed at Jin Zhou and Qin Feiyang and said, What? They passed the assessment. What the hell is going on? The group was dumbfounded. Jean Fatso said, Jin Zhou, tell me what you think. Okay. Jin Zhou nodded and took a step forward. He turned around and glanced at the more than 3,000 people. His eyes flashed with disdain. Do you know why we didn't choose? Because the soul stone and divine crystal are both important. The more than 3,000 people looked at each other. So it's like this. Soul stone, divine crystal. No one can do without these 2 things. So this multiple choice question is actually a test of everyone's brains. Qin Feiyang muttered. No. Brother Jean clearly said before that those who don't make a choice after 3 breaths will be eliminated. Someone suddenly said. This is a test of your judgment. Because working in the resource palace, you will face many sudden problems at any time. If you don't even have a little opinion and judgment, then how can you solve these problems? It's impossible to ask for help for everything, right? If that's the case, then why do I need you in the resource palace? Jean Fatso coldly snorted. When the more than 3,000 people heard this, their faces were full of regret. This question was actually very simple, but why didn't they think of it? Jean Fatso impatiently waved his hand. You have been eliminated, quickly disperse. Everyone sighed and left in groups of 2s and 3s. They waited here for an entire afternoon, and some even waited for a whole day. But in the end, they were all eliminated in the first round. In their hearts, they were more or less annoyed. After a while, only Qin Feiyang's group and Jin Zhou's group of 6 were left in the square. Jean Fatso glanced at Qin Feiyang's group of 3 and said, Next, the second question. But speaking of this, his eyebrows slightly raised, and then he lowered his head and pondered. What's wrong, fat brother? The 2 little followers looked at him suspiciously. Nothing. Jean Fatso waved his hand, looked up at Qin Feiyang's group of 9, and said, Forget about the second question. Let's go directly to the next round. Forget about it? Qin Feiyang's group of 3 looked at each other. Jin Zhou was also a little surprised and said, Brother, why do you want to forget about it? Can't you see it? Jiang Haotian's group of 3 has already guessed that you got the inside information from me. So no matter what question I ask, they will follow you and give the same answer. Doing this kind of meaningless thing, it's better to go directly to the next round. Jin Fatso sighed. Jin Zhou raised his eyebrows and glanced at Qin Feiyang's group of 3, with a trace of killing intent hidden in his eyes. Jin Fatso took a deep breath, looked at the 2 little followers and said, "Give them the divine crystals. Come. Wonderful book house." Chapter 2081. Hearing this, the 2 followers ran to Qin Feiyang's group of 3 and Jin Zhou's group of 6, and gave each of them 5 divine crystals. Jin Zhou's group of 6 held the 5 divine crystals without any doubt or surprise. But Qin Feiyang's group of 3 was a little puzzled. Why did they have to be given 5 divine crystals? As a member of the Resource Palace, you must know how to make money. As for the second stage, it is to use the 5 divine crystals in your hands to earn even more wealth before daybreak. Jin Fatso said. So that's how it is. Qin Feiyang's group of 3 suddenly understood. Of course. A gentleman loves money and obtains it through the Tao. No one is allowed to rob, or steal. You are also not allowed to use your own wealth to make up the numbers. And you are also not allowed to use your connections to take shortcuts. In short, your capital is only 5 divine crystals. As for how to earn more, you can only rely on your own brains and abilities. Understand? Jin Fatso shouted. Understood. Jin Zhou's group of 6 nodded. Qin Feiyang's group of 3 looked at each other and nodded. In addition, this time the Resource Palace only has a total of 6 spots. In other words, 3 of you will be eliminated. As for the criteria for elimination, whoever earns less wealth will be eliminated. Jin Fatso finished and said, "What else do you not understand? Hurry up and ask." Huai said, "Senior brother Jin, is this test limited to the 9 Heavens Palace or outside the 9 Heavens Palace?" Jin Fatso said, "There are no restrictions. You can go wherever you want." So it's like that. There is one more question. Will the 9 of us form a team or go our own way? Huai asked again. It's fine to form a team or go our own way, Jin Fatso said. Huai frowned. If we go our own way, then even if someone cheats, no one will know, right? Regarding this point, of course, I have also considered it. I will have people follow you all the way and supervise you, Jin Fatso said. Huai nodded and said with a smile, "Senior brother Jin, there's no problem." Jin Fatso looked at Jin Zhou's group and asked, "What about you guys?" The 6 shook their heads. All right then. Jin Fatso nodded his head and glanced at the 9 people. Then he said to the 2 lackeys, "You 2 follow Jin Zhou and the others. You must watch them carefully. Don't let anyone cheat." Yes. The 2 nodded. As for junior brother Jiang and the other 2, Jin Fatso pondered for a while, looked at Qin Feiyang and the other 2, and said with a smile, "I'll supervise it personally. Do you have any objections?" Of course not. It's our honor to have senior brother Jin personally supervise us. How could we have any objections? Qin Feiyang and the other 2 laughed. Jin Fatso chuckled and said, "Then let's begin. Before dawn tomorrow, we'll gather at the resource hall." Jin Zhou's group stood in place without moving. They all looked at Qin Feiyang and the other 2 with playful eyes. Huai glanced at the 6 people and looked down at the 5 divine crystals in his hand. He said, "Brother Jiang, brother Mu, I don't know anything about making money. I'll have to rely on you guys. If the capital was a little more, and the time limit was a little longer, there would be no way. But now there are only 5 divine crystals. Even if we add them together, we only have 15. What's the use of that? The worst thing is that the time limit is so short." Mu Tianyang said secretly. He also had a headache. Huai said, "Then why don't we follow Jin Zhou and the others and see how they do it? It's useless. They clearly don't want to team up with us. If we shamelessly follow them, they will still find a way to get rid of us." Mu Tianyang said secretly. Qin Feiyang glanced at Jin Fatso and said, "I think, no matter how hard we work, we can't win this round." "What do you mean?" Mu Tianyang and Huai were surprised. "With Fatso Jin here, even if we want to cheat, we won't have a chance. But Jin Zhou's group is different. They are in cahoots with Fatso Jean, so even if they cheat, Jean Fatso won't care. It's even possible that he won't care and will cover for them. Qin Feiyang said. Mu Tianyang said secretly, then won't we only be eliminated? Yes. Even if we can earn 100 million divine crystals, we will inevitably be eliminated. Qin Feiyang said. Then what should we do? We can't just be eaten by Fatso Jean like this, right? Wei frowned. Qin Feiyang lowered his head, his eyes flickering. Jean Fatso asked suspiciously, Junior brother Jiang, are you going to stand here forever? Mu Tianyang laughed. Aren't we just thinking about how to make money? So it's like that. Jean Fatso suddenly smiled and said, then you guys take your time to think, I'm not in a hurry. But in his heart he was sneering. It was better to give up early, because no matter what he did, he would be eliminated in the end. Suddenly, Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed with a bright light, and said, Yu Huang don't cultivate yet. What is it? Yu Huang's voice sounded in Qin Feiyang's mind. Immediately turn the color of your skin transparent, and then take the image crystal, and follow Jin Zhou and the others. I'm sure that they will definitely cheat. When the time comes, record the process of them cheating for me. Qin Feiyang thought. Understood. Yu Huang replied. After he was ready, Qin Feiyang pulled Yu Huang out without anyone noticing. Not only could Yu Huang change the color of his skin, he also didn't have the slightest aura. As long as you don't use your divine sense to search, even if it was standing in front of you, you wouldn't be able to find it. But now, even if you used your divine sense, you wouldn't be able to find it. Because there was a hidden soul stone in its mouth. Qin Feiyang wasn't lacking in hidden soul stone right now. During this period of time in the ancient realm, he had also obtained a lot of universe rings. For example, Nie Yin and Feng Zijuan's universe ring had hidden soul stone in it. In other words, with the concealment soul stone, Yu Huang would be invulnerable. No one would be able to discover it. Qin Feiyang secretly warned Yu Huang a few more times, then looked at Mu Tianyang and Hui, and laughed. Let's go. Where to? Mu Tianyang and Hui were suspicious. To Sky Dragon City. Qin Feiyang smiled and soared into the sky, flying towards the heaven stairway. Mu Tianyang and Hui looked at each other. With a trace of suspicion, they quickly chased after him. Jean Fatso glanced at Qin Feiyang and the other two, and said to Jin Zhou and the other 5. You guys be careful, don't let anyone catch you. Don't worry. Jin Zhou secretly smiled. Jean Fatso looked at the backs of Qin Feiyang and the other two, the corner of his mouth hooked up into a sneer, and then chased after Qin Feiyang and the other two. Big brother Jin Zhou, what should we do? After Qin Feiyang and the others left, the 5 looked at Jin Zhou and asked, what should we do? Of course, we'll find a place where there's no one, drink, chat, and enjoy the moonlight. Jin Zhou laughed. Drink and chat? Enjoy the moonlight. The 5 looked at each other and quickly asked, what about the test? With my brother taking care of us, do we still need to take the test? Jin Zhou disdainfully smiled, and then soared into the sky, disappearing into the night like lightning. The 5 looked at each other, and couldn't help but laugh. The 2 little followers also laughed especially brightly, but they didn't realize that there was a little tail hiding in the dark, following them and watching them. Back to Qin Feiyang and the others. They had already left 9th Heaven Palace, and were standing on the mountain peak. Qin Feiyang looked at the direction of Sky Dragon City, and asked, Senior brother Jin, can we open the altar? Of course. Jin Fatso nodded. Are you sure? Don't say we cheated. Qin Feiyang said. Junior brother Jiang, from what you're saying, it's as if I'm targeting you. This altar is just a transportation tool. It has nothing to do with the test. Even if I say you guys cheated, no one will agree. Jin Fatso said helplessly. That's good. Qin Feiyang nodded with a smile, opened an altar, and walked up. Mu Tianyang, Hui, and Jin Fatso followed closely behind. The next moment, the 4 of them arrived at the west gate. Evening was the most lively time in Sky Dragon City. In front of the city gate, pedestrians came and went. When passing through the city gate, Qin Feiyang and the other 3 didn't go through any checks, and directly entered the city. So lively. Qin Feiyang leisurely walked on the street as he looked at the endless stream of people, and said with a smile, "After all, it's Sky Dragon City, the biggest city in the northern region. How can it not be lively?" Mu Tianyang and Hui laughed. "What's the situation?" Sightseeing. Looking at Qin Feiyang and the other two, Fatty Jean, who was at the back, frowned. He caught up with them in a few steps and asked calmly, "Junior Marshal Brother Jiang, where are we going?" "You'll know later." Qin Feiyang smiled mysteriously. In fact, Hui and Mu Tianyang also had some doubts. However, looking at Qin Feiyang's expression, they knew that he must have thought of a way, so they were too lazy to ask and just followed him. About half an hour passed. Finally, Qin Feiyang leisurely walked to the front of a restaurant. And Jean Fatso was taken aback. He raised his head to look at the restaurant, and three big words came into view. "Yulan Restaurant. Why are we still here?" Jean Fatso was stunned. Didn't they say they were going to make money? Why did they come here? Young Master Jiang? Standing at the entrance of the restaurant was a red-clothed woman. When she saw Qin Feiyang, she was stunned for a moment, then hurriedly greeted him with a smile. "I was wondering why I was a little uneasy today. It turns out that there are distinguished guests. Young Master Jiang, please come in. You really know how to talk." Qin Feiyang smiled at the woman and strode into the restaurant. Jiang Haotian, Hui, and Mu Tianyang. Wait, isn't that Feng Yuan's grandson, Jean Fatso? Why would they come to Yulan Tower together? As soon as they entered the Yulan restaurant, the people in the restaurant's hall were in an uproar. They all looked at Qin Feiyang and the other three in surprise. Qin Feiyang glanced at the audience and smiled at the woman. "Miss, please arrange a private room for me. I want to entertain distinguished guests." Distinguished guests? The red-clothed woman was stunned. Qin Feiyang put his arm around Jean Fatso's shoulder and laughed. "This senior brother Jean is the distinguished guest I want to entertain today. Come. Wonderful book house." Chapter 2082. Entertain me? Jean Fatso was stunned. Instead of earning money, she came to entertain him? What the hell was going on? Wait a minute. Was she trying to bribe him? The people in the restaurant hall all looked strange when they heard Qin Feiyang's words. Entertain Jean Fatso? Didn't the Feng family have a grudge against Jiang Haotian? As Feng Yuan's grandson, Jean Fatso should have a common enemy. Why was he so friendly with Jiang Haotian? Wasn't he afraid that Feng Yuan would be angry? I see. The woman in red glanced at Jean Fatso and smiled. Then please go to the top floor. The top floor? The people in the hall were stunned again. Wasn't the top floor a private place for Shangguan Qiu to entertain distinguished guests? And now, Shangguan Qiu wasn't in Yulan Tower. Why did she ask them to go to the top floor? Wait a minute. Was the relationship between Jiang Haotian and Shangguan Qiu so good that there was no distinction between them? Not to mention the outsiders, even Qin Feiyang himself was a little surprised. He looked at the woman in red and said, "Isn't this a little inappropriate?" "It's okay. Because this is the order of the Tower Master. The Tower Master has already said that if young Master Jiang comes, please go to the top floor with the best treatment." The woman in red smiled. The best treatment? Hearing this, everyone couldn't help but feel a storm in their hearts. One had to know. Shangguan Qiu was not only the Tower Master of Yulan Tower, but also the steward of the treasure school. She also had a terrifying master and a powerful sister. Furthermore, her innate talent was not bad. It could be said that this woman was the standard god's favored daughter, who knew how many men in the northern region regarded her as a goddess. But usually, except at the auction house, there was no chance to see her, let alone get close to her. But now, she actually regarded Jiang Haotian as such an important distinguished guest. Just what did this Jiang Haotian do to be able to gain the favor of this goddess? Jean Fatso was also extremely shocked. What was the relationship between Jiang Haotian and Shangguan Qiu to deserve such treatment? However, Qin Feiyang did not feel happy about this. On the contrary, he was secretly complaining in his heart. Although it seemed like something that was worth showing off, it actually made him a public enemy. Of course, He knew that he could not blame Shang Guanqiu. Shang Guanqiu had good intentions. It could only be said that some people were too jealous and couldn't bear to see others doing better than them, especially in front of women like Shang Guanqiu. The lady in red smiled and said, "Young Master Jiang, please." Qin Feiyang looked around. Most of the people had a trace of indignation in their eyes. Obviously, they were jealous. He took a deep breath, cupped his hands and said with a smile, "Then I shall accept your offer." Then he dragged Jin Fatso up to the top floor. Jin Fatso felt a little uncomfortable. After all, this was the Yulan Pavilion, not the Jade Zither Pavilion. If it was at the Jade Zither house, with his relationship with Feng Zihan, he could totally treat himself as the owner of the Jade Zither house. After all, they were cousins. But in the Yulan Pavilion, he was just an ordinary guest. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, "Senior brother Jin, you are a man who has seen the world. Why are you still so shy?" Jin Fatso enjoyed this round of flattery. He straightened his back a little. With a big belly, he was very proud. After entering the private room on the top floor, Qin Feiyang invited Jin Fatso to sit down. He looked at the lady in red and said with a smile, "Miss, I want the best wine and the best dishes." "Understood." The lady in red nodded and said, "Have a seat. I'll arrange it now." Then, the lady in red turned and walked out quickly, closing the door. "Junior brother Jiang, what on earth are you doing?" How could Jin Fatso sit still? As soon as the door was closed, he immediately got up and asked, "Sit, sit, sit." Qin Feiyang got up and pushed Jin Fatso back to his seat. Then he returned to his seat and sighed. "To tell you the truth, senior brother Feng Zijuan's death has become my regret. I wanted to reconcile with him, but now, I don't even have the chance to say sorry." Jin Fatso was stunned and smiled. "I didn't expect junior brother Jiang to be such a sentimental person. No. I just hate him. Feng Zijuan was such a good person. How could he die so young? Don't let me know who it is. Otherwise, I won't let him go." Qin Feiyang said angrily. "Junior brother Jiang, I believe Zijuan will be very happy if he knows about this in the underworld." Jin Fatso smiled and asked suspiciously, "But what does this have to do with today's test?" "The test is only secondary. This is a rare opportunity. Today, I must treat senior brother Jin to a feast. In the future, I will have to thank senior brother Jin for taking care of me in the 9th Heaven Palace." Qin Feiyang cupped his hands and smiled. "What do you mean? Junior brother Jiang, are you really trying to bribe me?" "Let me tell you, this is against the rules. You can't do it," Jin Fatso said righteously. "Bribe?" Qin Feiyang was stunned and shook his head. "Senior brother Jin, look at what you're saying. How can this be called a bribe? We got together because we hit it off. It has nothing to do with anything else." "That's good. I'm afraid that if you want to take a shortcut, not only will you hurt yourself but also me." Jin Fatso smiled. "Why would I? Let's not talk about the test. Today, we'll just drink and chat. We won't go home until we're drunk." Qin Feiyang said. "Okay. We won't go home until we're drunk." Jin Fatso nodded. Anyway, he wasn't going to take the test. What was there to be afraid of? "Let's drink then." Dong. A moment later. The woman in red brought a few waiters, and brought a large table of delicious food and 4 jars of wine. Mu Tianyang anxiously held a jar of wine and opened the lid. A strong smell of wine immediately rushed out. Mu Tianyang's eyes suddenly lit up and smiled. "This is the wine that Shang Guanqiu invited us to drink last time. It's absolutely divine." Fatso Jin said, "I've also heard of this wine. It's really good. It seems that senior brother Jin is a kindred spirit. Come, I'll pour it for senior brother Jin." Mu Tianyang held the jar of wine and ran to Fatso Jin and poured a full cup. Then, he filled the cups in front of Qin Feiyang and Hui, then returned to his seat and smiled. "Come, let's toast." Qin Feiyang and Hui raised their cups. "Senior brother Jin, let's toast to you. I hope that in the future, we can be good friends, brothers." Mu Tianyang smiled. Hui laughed and said, "I'll add one more thing. We'll share blessings and misfortunes." Good. Jin Fatso nodded and laughed. "Come, let's toast." The four of them clinked their cups and drank it all in one gulp. Come, let's eat. Mu Tianyang was very enthusiastic. Qin Feiyang and Hua Yi did not hesitate, and the private room was filled with laughter. The woman in red also left sensibly. But soon, a woman appeared in the private room. What's the occasion today? Why are you drinking so happily? It was Sheng Guanqiu. Sheng Guanqiu asked in surprise as he looked at the four of them who were drinking and chatting happily. Why are you here? Qin Feiyang was stunned. He put down his cup and asked suspiciously. You're all distinguished guests of Yulan Restaurant. As the owner, how can I not come to accompany you personally? Sheng Guanqiu smiled. Distinguished guests? Jin Fatso smiled wryly. What kind of distinguished guest was he? Until now, he still had not figured out what Jiang Haoyan and the other two wanted to do. Sheng Guanqiu walked to Qin Feiyang's side. Wisps of pleasant body fragrance went into Qin Feiyang's nostrils. If it were anyone else, they would definitely be tempted. However, Qin Feiyang's expression remained calm. There were no improper thoughts in his mind. But Hua Yi was a little dissatisfied. He looked at Sheng Guanqiu and said, Sister-in-law, there are so many seats. Why are you sitting next to him? Sister-in-law. Qin Feiyang, Mu Tianyang, and Jin Fatso looked at each other. Sheng Guanqiu was also caught off guard by this sudden address. She looked at Hua Yi for a moment and frowned. You're not the man my sister was talking about, are you? Yes, yes. Hua Yi nodded repeatedly and asked, What did she say about me in front of you? Sheng Guanqiu rolled her eyes and said, She said you're shameless and a scoundrel. Absolutely impossible. I'm indeed a little shameless. But the word scoundrel has nothing to do with me. You must have heard it wrong. Hua Yi waved his hand in disbelief. Believe it or not, it's up to you. But there's one thing you must remember. Don't call me that in the future. Who's your sister-in-law? Sheng Guanqiu snorted and looked up at Fatso Jin. She smiled and said, Fatso, you've never been to my Yulan restaurant. Well, Jin Fatso looked a little embarrassed. In fact, Yulan restaurant and Yuqin restaurant were competitors. As Feng Zihan's cousin, he naturally could not spend money in Yulan restaurant. I'm very happy that you can come today. Come, let me toast you. Sheng Guanqiu held a wine glass and smiled. I wouldn't dare. Junior brother Jiang, junior brother Mu, junior brother Hua, let's drink together. Jin Fatso quickly waved his hand and looked at Qin Feiyang and the other two for help. Although he had Feng Yuan as his backer, Sheng Guanqiu's backer was even more terrifying. Not only did he have Shengguan Fenglan, but he also had the entire treasure hall. Therefore, he did not dare to be presumptuous in front of Sheng Guanqiu. Qin Feiyang glanced at Fatso Jin and nodded with a smile. Okay. We'll keep you company. Mu Tianyang and Hua Yi looked at each other and smiled. They also picked up their wine glasses. Sheng Guanqiu was also quite forthright. He downed his wine in one gulp. Then he glanced at Qin Feiyang and transmitted his voice to him. You're definitely up to no good. Me? Qin Feiyang was stunned. He thought to himself. What do you mean? Last time when my sister was here, you didn't drink. But this time, you're drinking so happily with Fatso Jin. It's very unusual. Sheng Guanqiu transmitted his voice meaningfully. The corner of Qin Feiyang's mouth twitched. He smiled secretly and said, It's nothing. I'm just in a good mood today. You can continue to pretend. Sheng Guanqiu rolled his eyes and transmitted his voice again. By the way, I'm here today because I have something to ask you. P.S. On the 17th, which is the day after tomorrow, my grandfather's funeral will be held. I'll be busy for a few days. Please forgive me. Calm. Wonderful book house. Chapter 2083. What's the matter? Qin Feiyang asked secretly while drinking with Fatso Jin. Sheng Guanqiu frowned. Isn't the failure rate of the elixirs too high? Qin Feiyang's face froze, but he soon calmed down. He smiled and said, Refining elixirs is not a game. It's normal to fail a little. It's inevitable that they will fail. But you've wasted 15 out of 100 sets of elixirs? Do you know how hard it is to find these elixirs? Can't you be more careful? Sheng Guanqiu said angrily. What? 15 sets of elixirs? Qin Feiyang was stunned. Yes. Mu Tianyang gave me exactly 85 four elephants infinite divine elixirs. Doesn't that mean 15 sets of elixirs are wasted? Sheng Guanqiu said. What's going on? Qin Feiyang frowned. He had given Mu Tianyang 90 pills. How did it become 85 pills in Sheng Guanqiu's hands? Wait. Qin Feiyang glanced at Mu Tianyang and said secretly, You swallowed 5 four elephants infinite divine elixirs? Mu Tianyang was stunned, but he did not deny it. He said secretly, You swallowed 10 pills, and I only swallowed 5. It's not too much. Qin Feiyang was speechless for a moment. Mu Tianyang smiled and said, Let's not talk about this. Come on, let's drink. Qin Feiyang stared at him and raised his glass. He said to Sheng Guanqiu, I'm sorry. I'll be more careful next time. I'll try to reduce the failure rate. I'm not blaming you. I just feel sorry for you. After all, it was not easy to gather 100 sets of elixirs. Sheng Guanqiu said secretly. Yes. Qin Feiyang agreed inwardly. Soon after, he rolled his eyes and laughed inwardly. However, you definitely won't lose out. I won't lose anything, Sheng Guanqiu said with a smile. His tone was full of confidence. Qin Feiyang asked, When are you going to start the auction? Let's build momentum first, then auction. The plan is in 3 days. Furthermore, I plan to auction it off using soul stones, Sheng Guanqiu said. You do have some tricks up your sleeve. Qin Feiyang secretly gave him a thumbs up. On the other side, on a mountain peak near the 9 Heavens Palaces intersect, Jinzhou's group of 6 and the 2 lackeys were also gathered together, drinking and chatting happily. In the blink of an eye, it was almost dawn. In the private room, the faces of the 5 people all showed signs of drunkenness. But their hearts were bright. Jin Fatso looked at Qin Feiyang and the other 2, feeling more and more puzzled. For the entire night, the 3 of them did not mention anything about the test. Had he already given up? He turned his head and looked out the window. The sky was already turning bright. If he didn't move now, he would run out of time. Qin Feiyang glanced at Fatso Jin, then looked at Sheng Guanqiu and said with a smile, Miss Shengguan, there's something I want to ask you. What is it? Sheng Guanqiu was suspicious. Qin Feiyang asked, What can I buy with 15 divine gems in your treasure pavilion? Jin Fatso immediately pricked up his ears. Had it finally begun? 15 divine gems? Sheng Guanqiu was stunned. After thinking carefully for a while, she said, 15 sets of medicinal herbs for healing elixirs. That's good. Qin Feiyang smiled, took out 5 divine gems from his arms, and put them on the table. Then he looked at Mu Tianyang and Huai. The 2 understood and took out 5 divine gems respectively. Qin Feiyang looked at Sheng Guanqiu and said with a smile, I'll buy 15 sets of medicinal herbs for healing elixirs from you now. What's going on? Sheng Guanqiu was stunned. Don't ask, Qin Feiyang said. Sheng Guanqiu looked at them suspiciously. She counted 15 sets of medicinal herbs from her interspatial ring and handed them to Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang looked at Mu Tianyang and said with a smile, Brother Mu, you do it. Me? Mu Tianyang pointed at his nose and said with a frown, You should do better. Qin Feiyang said, It's all the same. It doesn't matter. Okay then. Mu Tianyang nodded. He stood up and waved his hand, taking out an alchemy furnace and alchemy fire. The alchemy furnace and alchemy fire were both 9th grade. Although they could not refine elixirs like the 4 symbols infinite divine elixir, they were more than enough to refine healing elixirs. Mu Tianyang's alchemy technique was also very skillful. Compared to Qin Feiyang, he wasn't much worse. Soon, 15 healing elixirs were produced. There were 7 veins on each elixir. Amazing, Qin Feiyang said to himself in surprise. Although he had known Mu Tianyang for many years, this was the first time he had seen Mu Tianyang refine elixirs with his own eyes. He could actually refine elixirs with 7 veins? It seemed that his mind power was not low either. Compared to you, it's still not good enough. Mu Tianyang sighed to himself, but there was still a hint of pride in his tone. Refining elixirs with 7 veins, Even if he was not a genius, he could be regarded as one of the best alchemists. Qin Feiyang said with a smile, Miss Shangguan, how many divine gems are these 15 healing elixirs worth? This? To me, it's not worth a single penny. After all, healing elixirs are too common, and those who have a little bit of strength basically use life elixirs. According to the market price, this healing elixir is worth 2 divine gems at most, Shangguan Qiu said after thinking for a while. So little? It's at least 5 veins. Mu Tianyang was displeased. If it's a life elixir, 5 veins will definitely be worth several times more. But I'm really sorry about the healing elixir. Unless it's a divine-level healing elixir, no one will care about it, Shangguan Qiu said. It's okay. 2 divine gems it is. You can buy it and give me 30 divine gems, Qin Feiyang said with a smile. Shangguan Qiu looked at the 3 of them suspiciously. What are you doing? To be honest, we want to enter the resource hall, and the content of this assessment is to use the 5 divine gems in our hands to earn more divine gems, Qin Feiyang said. I see. Shangguan Qiu suddenly understood and said with a smile. Then I'll give you a higher price. How about 10 million divine gems each? I believe that these divine gems will definitely help you pass the assessment. Jin Fatso narrowed his eyes and glanced at Qin Feiyang and the other 2. As long as Qin Feiyang and the other 2 nodded, it would be tantamount to violating the rules. At that time, he would naturally have a reason to eliminate the 3 of them directly. Qin Feiyang glanced at Fatso Jin, then looked at Shangguan Qiu and said with a smile, That won't do. The rules say that we can't use our connections. Just do as you like. Jin Fatso couldn't help but feel disappointed when he heard that. But soon he sneered in his heart. It didn't matter. After all, they had only earned a dozen divine gems. They had only earned a dozen divine gems after an entire night. If this news spread, they would become a joke. Shangguan Qiu took a deep look at Qin Feiyang and nodded with a smile. Okay, then we'll follow the rules. As she spoke, she took out 15 divine gems. In addition to the 15 divine gems that Qin Feiyang and the other 2 had given her, there were exactly 30 divine gems. Hui glanced at the 30 divine gems and said with a frown, Brother Jiang, I'm afraid that's not enough. Before Qin Feiyang could speak, Fatso Jin spoke first. Even if it's not enough, there's no other way. Because time's up. Look out the window. Qin Feiyang and the other 2 looked out the window. The sky was already bright. Hui and Mu Tianyang immediately frowned. They had only earned 15 divine gems. Brother Jiang, you don't think that we can win with just these 15 divine gems, do you? What kind of medicine are you selling in your gourd? Can you tell us? Hui asked through telepathy. Mu Tianyang also had a suspicious look on his face. Qin Feiyang smiled secretly and said, Don't worry, I promise you that you will win. Really? The 2 of them were still skeptical. Really? Qin Feiyang said secretly. Hearing this, Mu Tianyang and Hui secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Qin Feiyang looked at Fatso Jin and said with a smile, Senior brother Jin, did you have fun drinking tonight? Yes. I've never been as happy as today, Jin Fatso said. As long as you're happy. Qin Feiyang laughed and put away the 30 divine gems. He stood up and said, Since it's morning, let's go back. Okay. Jin Fatso nodded. Qin Feiyang looked at Shangguan Qiu again and said, I still have things to do. I'll write down today's bill and pay you another day. Shangguan Qiu waved his hand and said, It's okay. It's my treat today. Thank you very much. Qin Feiyang did not stand on ceremony. He cupped his hands and smiled, then opened a transmission altar. Resource Hall. Jin Zhou's group of 6 and the 2 followers had returned to the square. Everyone had a bright smile on their faces. Whoosh! When Qin Feiyang and the others rushed back to Ninth Heaven Palace and landed on the square, the 6 people immediately cast provocative looks at Qin Feiyang and the other 2. Qin Feiyang turned a blind eye. Because the moment he landed on the square, he felt something small get into his trousers and then climb into his arms. Clearly, this little thing was none other than Yu Huang. How was it? Qin Feiyang transmitted his voice to him. Yu Huang said to himself, They were drinking and chatting all night and did nothing. The two followers were also in cahoots with them. Just as I expected, Qin Feiyang muttered and asked, "Did you record it?" "Of course," Yu Huang said. "Well done. Go to the castle and send me the video you recorded," Qin Feiyang said. With a thought, Yu Huang, who was hiding in his arms, suddenly disappeared. Fatso looked at Jin Zhou's group and took a few steps forward. Facing Qin Feiyang and the others, he said with a smile, "A night has passed. Take out your results." Qin Feiyang directly took out the 30 divine arts. "And that's all you have?" Jin Zhou's group of 6 looked at Qin Feiyang in astonishment. "Quite a lot." Qin Feiyang smiled. "This is a lot. Let me count. 1, 2, 3. Haha, a total of 30 divine crystals. If you divide it equally, each of you will have earned 5 divine crystals." "Are you sure you're not here to be funny?" The 6 people laughed unscrupulously. "What about you?" Qin Feiyang asked with a smile. "Us." The 6 people looked at each other and laughed even more happily. Then Jin Zhou took out a qianquan bag from his arms and shook it in front of Qin Feiyang's group, saying, "There are more than 700,000 divine crystals inside. Even if we divide it equally, each of us will have more than 100,000. It's enough to crush you. Come. Wonderful book house." Chapter 2084. So much. Qin Feiyang was surprised. "Of course." Jin Zhou smiled proudly and handed the qianquan bag to Fatso. Jin Fatso counted carefully and nodded. "There are indeed 700,000 divine gems." "Amazing. You earned 700,000 divine gems with your capital of 5 divine gems in one night. I'm afraid that even the people of the treasure school can't compare with you." Qin Feiyang laughed. "Don't be so sarcastic. We didn't steal or rob. We earned it with our own ability." Jin Zhou snorted. "Who knows?" Qin Feiyang laughed. Jin Fatso raised his eyebrows, looked at the 2 followers and asked, "Did they cheat?" "We didn't leave a single step during the whole process. We definitely didn't cheat," the 2 lackeys said. "Very good." Jin Fatso nodded with a smile. But Qin Feiyang suddenly looked at the 2 followers and said, "Can you guarantee with your life that they didn't cheat?" "What do you mean?" The 2 followers immediately glared at Qin Feiyang. Nothing. I just can't believe it." After all, the capital was only 5 divine gems. They added up to only 30 divine gems. 30 versus 700,000. How many times is that? Qin Feiyang laughed. Jin Fatso was extremely dissatisfied and said, "Junior brother Jiang, you can't, but it doesn't mean that others can't." Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded repeatedly. Jin Fatso glanced at them and said, "Now the result is obvious. The one who will be eliminated is..." "Wait." Qin Feiyang suddenly spoke again. Jin Fatso was slightly stunned and frowned. "Junior brother Jiang, what do you want to do?" "Isn't it obvious?" "He's not convinced." Jin Zhou and the other 5 people sneered. Jin Fatso said, "Junior brother Jiang, is it true?" "Yes, I'm not convinced." Qin Feiyang nodded. "You..." Jin Fatso was infuriated inside. "Junior brother Jiang, to be honest, I used to admire you, but I didn't expect you to be a sore loser." Qin Feiyang smiled and said indifferently, "If they had defeated me with their true abilities, I wouldn't have anything to say. However, they had resorted to trickery, and there were even people shielding them." Hearing this, the 6 people from Jin Zhou suddenly panicked. A wisp of surprise and bewilderment flashed through Jin Fatso's eyes, and he said in a low voice, "Junior brother Jiang, what do you mean by that? I'm the chief examiner of this assessment. Aren't you talking about me when you say that someone is shielding them?" "Everyone knows who I'm talking about." Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. He turned to look at Hua Yi and said, "Brother Hua, I'll have to trouble you to make a trip and invite the law enforcement hall master here." "No need. I'll send her a message." Hua Yi waved his hand and took out an image crystal. "What? You even invited the hall master of the law enforcement hall?" The 6 people on the golden boat were shocked. Could it be that this person had something on them? Jin Fatso transmitted his voice. "Jin Zhou, where were you this night?" Jinzhou secretly said. We hid on a mountain peak with no one around, drinking and chatting. Are you sure there's no one around? Jin Fatso secretly asked. I'm sure. I also used my divine sense to search. Jinzhou replied. That's good. Jin Fatso breathed a sigh of relief and secretly sneered. If there's no evidence, then I'd like to see what kind of tricks this person can play. Buzz. Soon after, a shadow appeared. It was Shengguan Fenglan. What's the matter? Shengguan Fenglan looked at Qin Feiyang and the other two and asked faintly. Qin Feiyang cupped his hands and smiled. This disciple would like to invite the hall master to come to the resource hall. Why do you want to go to the resource hall? Shengguan Fenglan was suspicious. There's something I have to ask the hall master to help us uphold justice, Qin Feiyang said. Uphold justice, Shengguan Fenglan's eyes flashed and said. Wait for me, I'll be right there. After saying that, the shadow disappeared. She really came? Jin Fatso raised his eyebrows without a trace and looked at Qin Feiyang meaningfully. Junior brother Jiang, no matter what you do, you have to leave yourself a way out. Qin Feiyang was stunned. Did he start to threaten him? He cupped his hands and smiled. Thank you for your teaching, senior brother Jin. Jin Fatso smiled and said. I don't dare to teach, just a kind reminder. Thank you. After all, senior brother Jin is also kind to teach me how to be a person. Qin Feiyang laughed. Qin Feiyang was very modest. He shouldn't be worried, but on the contrary, Jin Fatso gradually had an ominous premonition in his heart. About a moment later, Shengguan Fenglan finally arrived. She stood in the void, her light purple dress and soft black hair fluttering in the wind. She looked like a goddess descending to the mortal world, stunning Huai. Greetings, Hall Master. Not only Qin Feiyang and the other two, Jin Fatso and the others also bowed. Shengguan Fenglan glanced at Jin Fatso and the others, then looked at Qin Feiyang and said, What's the matter? Qin Feiyang said, Hall Master, please allow this disciple to ask, if the people of the resource hall made a mistake, can you do anything about it? Nonsense. This hall master is the hall master of the law enforcement hall. As long as it's someone from the Nine Heavens Palace, this hall master has the right to punish them. Shengguan Fenglan said. That's good. Qin Feiyang nodded and said. Then this disciple will ask again. If the people of the resource hall abuse their power and bend the law, how should they be punished? If it's light, they will be expelled from the Nine Heavens Palace. If it's heavy, they will be executed on the spot. Shengguan Fenglan said without hesitation. Hearing this sentence, Jin Fatso's gaze suddenly trembled slightly. This was a sign of a guilty conscience. People who did something wrong were most afraid of hearing the word death. Then how is it considered light and heavy? Qin Feiyang said. Shengguan Fenglan frowned impatiently and said, If you have something to say, just say it. Why ask so many questions? This hall master has his own judgment. Okay. Then hall master, please look at a video first. Qin Feiyang took out the image crystal, and with a wave of his hand, a divine light swept out and rushed into the sky, and then a picture slowly unfolded. What is it? Everyone looked up suspiciously. Huai and Mu Tianyang also didn't know what was going on. But soon, the faces of Jin Fatso and Jin Zhou changed, and their mouths kept muttering. How could it be? Mu Tianyang and Jin Zhou had a smile on their faces. It turned out that this guy had already arranged it. Looking at Shengguan Fenglan's expression again, it was extremely cold. The video that Yu Huang recorded was very long, and after a long time the flashing picture stopped. At the same time that the picture stopped, Shengguan Fenglan's body surged with a monstrous anger, and at the same time, she lowered her head and looked at Jin Fatso and Jin Zhou, as well as the two little followers. Hall Master, we were wrong, please spare our lives. Except for Jin Fatso, all of them knelt on the ground in an instant, begging again and again. Jin Fatso didn't kneel, not because there was someone supporting him, but because he was scared silly. His whole person fell into a kind of panic that couldn't be dissolved. May I ask Hall Master, this kind of practice of favoritism and deceit is considered light or heavy? Qin Feiyang put away the image crystal and asked with a smile. Jin Fatso. Shengguan Fenglan shouted coldly. Jean Fatso quickly knelt on the ground and kept kowtowing, exclaiming, "Hall Master, this disciple was confused and did such a stupid thing. Please have mercy." Confused? You're really audacious. A little disciple wants to cover the sky in Jiutian Palace? Shengguan Fenglan shouted. No, this disciple didn't. This disciple was wrong. This disciple won't dare to do it again. Please have mercy and let this disciple go this time. Jean Fatso cried in despair. How did things turn out like this? Jiang Haoyan had been drinking with him in Yulan Tower, but why was he holding this video in his hand? Have mercy? Shengguan Fenglan laughed angrily and shouted. Where's Feng Yuan? Her voice was like thunder, resounding in all directions. Swish. Soon. A red-haired old man descended over the square. If it wasn't Feng Yuan, who else could it be? And it also alarmed many disciples who came to watch the show. Feng Yuan looked at Qin Feiyang and the other two, and then at Jean Fatso and the others kneeling on the ground, and suddenly felt that something was wrong. He looked at Shengguan Fenglan suspiciously and said, "What's wrong?" Jiang Haotian, give that video to our hall master of the resource hall to enjoy. Shengguan Fenglan said. Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded and took out the video crystal. What? They were drinking and chatting the whole night. This Jean Fatso is too bold, isn't he? How dare he protect them like this? Those disciples who came to watch the show looked at the video in the void. On the one hand, they felt incredulous, and on the other hand, they were filled with righteous indignation. This was simply smearing the reputation of Jiutian Palace. Bastard! I let you invigilate because I trust you, but you did this behind my back. Who gave you the courage? After watching, Feng Yuan was also furious. He stepped in front of Jean Fatso and slapped him in the face. Jean Fatso rolled out on the spot like a rubber ball, with a black nose and swollen eyes. But he didn't care about that. He quickly got up and knelt on the ground, saying, "Grandfather, I was wrong, I won't do it again." Looking at Feng Yuan's angry appearance, Qin Feiyang and the other two couldn't help but sneer. Anyone with half a brain knew that Jean Fatso was definitely wronged. Because with Jean Fatso's courage, if there was no one behind him, he wouldn't dare to make such a decision. And who else had the ability to support Jean Fatso? It was him, Feng Yuan. Shengguan Fenglan looked at Feng Yuan and asked, "Feng Yuan, how do you think this matter should be handled?" Feng Yuan looked at Shengguan Fenglan, then gloomily looked at Qin Feiyang and the other two and shouted, "Expel him from Jiutian Palace." That's too light. He's just a disciple, and yet he dared to do such a thing. What does he think of us, the hall masters, and the great elders? Moreover, I don't think this matter is so simple, Shengguan Fenglan said. What do you mean? Feng Yuan raised his eyebrows. In the beginning, it was Feng Wenhai who framed Jiang Haoyan and the others, almost killing them. Then it was Jin Yunchang who deliberately arranged for Jiang Haoyan and the others to go to St. Peak, arousing the hatred of St. Peak disciples and almost killing them. And now, your grandson has also started to scheme against them. Feng Yuan, don't blame me for being suspicious, but who is behind these things? Shengguan Fenglan asked. Chapter 2085. Feng Yuan frowned. You want to say that this old man ordered it? I didn't say that. I just feel that it's a little strange. There are so many people in Ninth Heaven Palace. Why are the people who plotted against Jiang Haoyan and the others from your Feng family? Shengguan Fenglan said. Isn't that what you mean? I'm telling you, Shengguan Fenglan, don't slander me. Feng Yuan said angrily. Don't misunderstand. I'm just wondering. Since you said it wasn't you, then it definitely has nothing to do with you. However, this matter must be severely punished. Otherwise, it won't have a deterrent effect. Now, this hall will publicly announce that Jean Fatso and Jean Zhou and the others have deceived their superiors and subordinates. Their crimes are intolerable. Anyone related to this matter will be executed. Shengguan Fenglan shouted. What? Executed? Jean Fatso and Jean Zhou's faces turned pale. The two little followers also collapsed on the ground on the spot, their faces ashen. This was because Shangguan Fenglan had said that anyone who was involved in this matter would be executed. Naturally, this included them. Feng Yuan was also stunned on the spot. Not to mention the others, Jin Fatso was his biological grandson. Blood was thicker than water. How could he accept the execution of Jin Fatso? Shangguan Fenglan looked at Feng Yuan and said, Feng Yuan, do you want to do it yourself, or should I do it? Feng Yuan stared at Shangguan Fenglan and said in a deep voice, they are indeed wrong, but it doesn't need to be executed. Committing such a big mistake doesn't need to be executed? Feng Yuan, how big of a heart do you have? Do you want to wait for them to ride over us? To ride over the first elder's head before they can be executed? Or do you mean that because they are related to you, they can be lenient? Shangguan Fenglan shouted. Feng Yuan's eyes trembled and he hurriedly said, I didn't mean that. Then what do you mean? As a hall master, if you bend the law for personal gain and don't deal with it impartially, how can you convince the public? If that's the case, then I'm afraid you won't be the hall master of the resource hall for long. Shangguan Fenglan's face was full of anger. Feng Yuan's body suddenly shook, and a trace of panic appeared in his eyes. What did he mean by that? Could it be that the great elder already knew about this and was very angry? Feng Yuan, you're not an ordinary disciple. You're the leader of our 9 Heavens Palace. Sometimes, you have to know your limits. Shangguan Fenglan sighed and said in a gentler tone. Feng Yuan took a deep look at Shangguan Fenglan, then slowly closed his eyes and said weakly, you're a law enforcer. Do as you see fit. Grandpa, I don't want to die. Save me. Upon hearing this, Jin Fatso became anxious. The 6 people of Jinzhou also panicked. If Feng Yuan helped them, they might still have a chance of survival. But now, even Feng Yuan didn't care. Who else could save them? Shangguan Fenglan glanced at Feng Yuan and waved her hand lightly. A wave of divine power appeared and transformed into strands of fine silver needles that emitted a bone-piercing sharpness. Jin Fatso and the others were in despair. Don't kill me. Lord Hallmaster, I beg you, please don't kill me. This has nothing to do with me. It's all Feng Yuan and Jin Fatso's idea. They want to harm Jiang Haoyan. The 2 little followers were so scared that they even peed their pants and said in panic, what? It's actually Hall Master Feng Yuan who wants to harm Jiang Haoyan? This. The surrounding disciples who were watching the show were in an uproar in an instant. Shangguan Fenglan was also slightly stunned. Looking at the 2 little followers, she asked suspiciously, what did you say just now? It's Feng. The 2 little followers hurriedly said. But before they could finish their words, Feng Yuan suddenly opened his eyes and shouted, damn things, what nonsense are you talking about? With a single step, he landed in front of the 2 followers and slapped them with his palm. The bodies of the 2 followers immediately exploded in the void, their flesh and blood splattering everywhere. They didn't even have the chance to scream and died on the spot. What a terrifying method. The pupils of Qin Feiyang and the other 2 shrank. When this old thing went crazy, it was really a little scary. Shangguan Fenglan's eyes flashed. Looking at Jin Fatso and the others, she said, do you have anything to say? We. The few of them looked at Feng Yuan and swallowed their saliva. Since the order has been given to kill, then don't waste time. Feng Yuan glanced at Shangguan Fenglan coldly. Another wave of divine power appeared and blasted toward Jin Fatso and the others. Ah! Accompanied by shrill screams, Jin Fatso and the others died on the spot. Damn! He even killed his own grandson? He's simply inhumane. Hui muttered secretly. He had no choice. If Jin Fatso also said that he ordered it, then he would be able to escape responsibility. After all, the others are suspected of lying, but his own grandson would never lie. Mu Tianyang said secretly. That's right. If he didn't quickly silence them, with the courage of Jin Fatso and the others, under Shangguan Fenglan's interrogation, they would definitely tell the truth sooner or later. After all, the older the ginger, the spicier it is. In this way he can continue to be carefree. Qin Feiyang also sighed secretly. Feng Yuan glanced at the bodies of Jin Fatso and the others, then looked up at Shangguan Fenglan and said, are you satisfied now? You can't say that. It's not about whether I'm satisfied or not, it's the rules. Shengguan Fengyuan said. Humph. Fengyuan snorted coldly. Ignoring the bodies, he turned and prepared to enter the resource hall. Hallmaster Fengyuan. Qin Feiyang hurriedly shouted. Fengyuan stopped and turned to look at Qin Feiyang, his eyes extremely terrifying. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, Hallmaster, we can be considered to have passed the assessment. When do you think we can enter the resource hall and start working? Want to work? Okay, let's start now. Go and clean the resource hall inside and out. If there's even a speck of dust, I'll hold you responsible. Fengyuan shouted. Yes, Hallmaster. Qin Feiyang and the other two bowed and said. A murderous intent flashed in Fengyuan's eyes. Then he entered the resource hall without looking back. Okay, you can all go now. Shengguan Fengyuan waved to the surrounding disciples, then looked down at Qin Feiyang and the other two, and said, You guys also do your work well, don't cause trouble in the resource hall. After saying that, she left. Senior Brother Jiang, Senior Brother Mu, Senior Brother Hua, congratulations. As soon as Shengguan Fengyuan left, some disciples surrounded Qin Feiyang and the other two, their faces full of flattery. But before Qin Feiyang and the other two could speak, some people came forward and dragged those people back. What are you doing? Don't you know Hallmaster Fengyuan's temper? How dare you get close to him? This time they killed Fatso Jin. Hallmaster Fengyuan will definitely not let them off. Be careful not to get burned. A group of people whispered. Yeah, seems like we can't curry favor with them. Not only can we not curry favor with them, but we also have to keep a distance from them. Yes. That. Senior Brother Jiang, Senior Brother Mu, Senior Brother Hua. You guys go ahead. We'll come and see you when we're free. Go. After whispering for a while, the group of people smiled at Qin Feiyang and the other two, then turned and left quickly. All of them. Do they think we're deaf? Mu Tianyang was a little angry. Although those people were deliberately lowering their voices, with their current cultivations, it was simply impossible for them to escape their ears. Okay. They're also afraid of bringing trouble to themselves. It's understandable. Moreover, I feel more comfortable like this. Qin Feiyang smiled. Some people like to be surrounded by a group of people to flatter them. But Qin Feiyang was a little disgusted by this, because this kind of people were basically very hypocritical. Usually, they would nod and bow to you, but when it came to a critical moment, they would run away faster than a rabbit. They were unreliable. Let's cut the crap and clean up. Otherwise, Fengyuan will really cripple us. Hua glanced at Qin Feiyang and the other two, then looked at the huge resource hall with a helpless expression. It wasn't easy to enter the resource hall, but in the end, they were asked to clean up? Wasn't this a waste of talent? Mu Tianyang glanced at the corpses of Fatso Jin and the other two, and said, How should we deal with this? Qin Feiyang pondered for a while, and said, Why don't we just bury them? That's not right. After all, Fatso Jin is Fengyuan's grandson, and this Jinzhou is also related to Fengyuan. Mu Tianyang looked at Qin Feiyang and said, That makes sense. Qin Feiyang nodded. After thinking for a while, he frowned and said, But Fengyuan didn't tell us how to deal with it. Hua said, Just send it to his lounge and let him deal with it himself. Qin Feiyang and Mu Tianyang's mouth twitched. Now, sending these corpses to Fengyuan was equivalent to adding fuel to the fire, right? But then again, it was quite interesting to do this. Qin Feiyang looked at Mu Tianyang and said, Why don't you go and prepare 2 coffins? Mu Tianyang was stunned. Anyway, there's no room for negotiation. We're not afraid of offending him again. Besides, we're also thinking for him, lest his grandson's corpse be exposed in the wilderness. Qin Feiyang said. Yes. Hua nodded. You guys. Mu Tianyang looked at the two helplessly and nodded. Okay, I'll go prepare 2 coffins. As for these people, I'll just find a place to bury them. Qin Feiyang and Hua nodded. Mu Tianyang waved his hand, rolled up the corpses, and rose into the air, disappearing into the mountain stream like lightning. Chapter 2086. Not long after, Mu Tianyang carried 2 brand new wooden coffins back. Qin Feiyang and Hua Yi worked together and placed the corpses of Jin Fatso and Jin Zhou into the wooden coffins. Then they closed the coffins. Who will deliver it? Hua Yi looked at the second floor of the resource hall, then looked at Qin Feiyang and asked. Qin Feiyang looked at Mu Tianyang. Don't look at me. When doing things, of course the division of labor must be clear. I was the one who brought back these coffins. Delivering them to Feng Yuan is naturally your business. Mu Tianyang said expressionlessly. Hua Yi looked at Qin Feiyang and said with a smile. Then I'll have to trouble Brother Jiang to make a trip? Qin Feiyang coughed and said. I've been weak and sickly since I was young. These 2 coffins are too heavy. I can't carry them. Hua Yi rolled his eyes and said helplessly. Fine, I'll go with you. How could a perfect war god not be able to carry 2 coffins? And he was weak and sickly since he was young. If he was really weak and sickly, how could he cultivate to this extent? If you don't want to go alone, just say it. Don't make such a lame excuse. Qin Feiyang smiled embarrassedly. He carried 1 coffin and said to Hua Yi. Then let's go. You're really letting me go? Hua Yi glared fiercely at Qin Feiyang. He could only carry the other coffin and follow behind Qin Feiyang as they walked towards the entrance of the resource hall. What's going on? Why are you carrying 2 coffins in? This is so unlucky. Seeing this, the staff in the resource hall hurriedly ran out and stopped Qin Feiyang and Hua Yi. What are you doing? Qin Feiyang looked at them suspiciously. Junior brother Jiang, senior brother Hua, we all know that you're not afraid of anything. But what's the meaning of you carrying 2 coffins in? The staff frowned. We don't want to either. But inside are Jin Fatso and Jin Zhou. You also know the relationship between these 2 people and our palace master. I'll definitely send it to the palace master. Qin Feiyang said innocently. So it's them. Those staff members nodded in understanding, but their expressions changed immediately. Junior Marshal Brother Jiang, the hall master is currently in a fit of anger. If you send him 2 coffins now, won't you be angering him? You still have to work in the resource hall in the future. You can't do this kind of thing. Those people hurriedly said. Qin Feiyang said. Then what do you suggest we do? This. Why don't we put it outside first? Those people were somewhat hesitant. No, this is the resource hall. How can we put 2 coffins outside? Qin Feiyang shook his head. That makes sense. Those people nodded and said. Then why don't we bury it? Buried? I don't dare to do this kind of thing. You can go if you want. If the palace master pursues this matter, I can't bear the responsibility. Qin Feiyang shook his head like a rattledrum. What should we do? Those people were also worried. Thank you for your kindness. Qin Feiyang smiled and said. I think we should send it to our palace master. If we really make him angry, I'll accept it. Take care. Those people looked at Qin Feiyang, then patted Qin Feiyang's shoulder sympathetically, then turned around and went to do their own things. Qin Feiyang and Hua Yi looked at each other, quickly walked up to the second floor, and stopped in front of a door. Dong. Qin Feiyang reached out and knocked on the door. Get lost. Feng Yuan's angry shout came from inside. Qin Feiyang said, Palace Master, we have something to do. Hearing Qin Feiyang's voice, Feng Yuan was even more annoyed. He shouted, Have you finished cleaning? Please calm down, please calm down. We'll go right away. Then we'll put these 2 coffins at the door. Qin Feiyang hurriedly said. He gave Hua Yi a meaningful glance and placed the coffin at the door. Soon after, the 2 of them laughed mischievously and ran to the first floor. Brother Jiang. Why do I feel like I did something bad when I was young? Hua Yi laughed. Me too. Qin Feiyang laughed. Coffins? At the same time, Feng Yuan, who was in the room, was slightly stunned. Then he got up and opened the door suspiciously. When he saw that there were really 2 coffins at the door, Feng Yuan was immediately furious and shouted, Get back here! Da-da! Accompanied by a burst of hurried footsteps. Qin Feiyang and Hua Yi rushed up again. Feng Yuan pointed to the coffins at the door and said in a deep voice, What do you mean by this? This, Qin Feiyang and Hua Yi looked at each other and said in unison, Mu Tianyang asked us to get these. Mu Tianyang. Feng Yuan gritted his teeth and shouted. Mu Tianyang, get up here. Outside the square. Mu Tianyang, who was rejoicing in Feng Yuan's misfortune, immediately quivered when he heard Feng Yuan's shout, and hurriedly ran into the resource hall. When he ran to the second floor and saw Feng Yuan's angry face, his heart suddenly thumped. He carefully walked to Qin Feiyang and Huiyi's side, looked at Feng Yuan and asked, Hall Master, what's wrong? You asked them to send this? Feng Yuan asked. This? Mu Tianyang was stunned and immediately glared at Qin Feiyang and Huiyi. The coffins were indeed brought by him, but this idea was thought of by these two bastards, and now they actually push the blame on him? How could there be such shameless people? Feng Yuan said angrily. Answer my question. Mu Tianyang lowered his head and said in fear, I made the coffins. As he said that, he raised his head and pointed at Qin Feiyang and Huiyi, and said angrily, But they came up with the idea. You guys are amazing. You came and gave me 2 coffins, cursing me to death. Good, very good. Feng Yuan glanced at the 3 of them and laughed. Qin Feiyang and the other 2 were stunned. Did Feng Yuan think that they were given to him? It seems that my resource hall can't accommodate you 3 great Buddhas. Take the coffins and get lost immediately. Feng Yuan shouted. Hall Master, it's a misunderstanding. This is not for you. No, it's for you too. This. What do you mean? After going around and around in circles, Qin Feiyang felt dizzy. Let me say it. Mu Tianyang pushed Qin Feiyang away, looked at Feng Yuan, and said, Hall Master, these 2 coffins belong to senior brother Jin and Jin Zhou. Feng Yuan was stunned and lowered his head to look at the coffins. Although senior brother Jin made a mistake and was sentenced to death by the law enforcement hall master, he is still your grandson. So we want to find 2 coffins so that they can be buried in peace. Mu Tianyang said. Feng Yuan was so angry that he laughed and said, Then shouldn't I thank you? No need to thank me. We are working under you, Palace Master. It is our duty and responsibility to share your burdens. It is what we should do. Mu Tianyang smiled flatteringly. Qin Feiyang looked at Mu Tianyang with disdain. No matter what, he was still an imperial emperor, but he actually showed a servile face. However, Feng Yuan's face was gloomy to the extreme. Feng Yuan looked at Qin Feiyang and Huiyi, and said, You 2 go clean up. I have a few words to say to Mu Tianyang alone. Alone? Qin Feiyang and Huiyi frowned. Feng Yuan said angrily, Didn't you hear clearly? Do you need me to say it again? Yes. Qin Feiyang and Huiyi quickly nodded, then turned around and left quickly. Mu Tianyang felt a little guilty and carefully asked, Hall Master, I am just a disciple, and we are separated by 108,000 miles. There seems to be nothing to say, right? Feng Yuan said. Do you still remember what you said when Wenhai went to find you when you first entered the 9 Heavens Palace? This? Mu Tianyang hesitated. Forgotten? But I haven't forgotten. At that time, you told us that it had nothing to do with Jiang Haotian. But now you are colluding with them to kill my grandson. Do you know what I want to do now? I want to kill you right now. Feng Yuan shouted. Mu Tianyang's eyes trembled, and hurriedly said, Hall Master, please forgive me, this disciple was also forced. Besides, this matter really has nothing to do with me. It was senior brother Jin who played favoritism. Feng Yuan said angrily. But in the end it was all caused by you. Yes. This disciple is willing to atone for his sins. Mu Tianyang nodded again and again. Feng Yuan sneered. What are you going to use to atone for your sins? Mu Tianyang said respectfully. In the future, if Hall Master needs this disciple to do anything, please tell me. I only ask for Hall Master's forgiveness. Feng Yuan was stunned, and looked at Mu Tianyang. Mu Tianyang lowered his head, not daring to even breathe loudly. Come to my lounge, let's have a good chat. A moment later. Feng Yuan coldly dropped a sentence, and turned to enter the lounge. Mu Tianyang looked at Feng Yuan's back, and a light flashed in his eyes, and he also followed into the lounge. Outside the square, Huiyi looked at the second floor. Huiyi said, Brother Jiang, what do they have to talk about in private? I don't know. Qin Feiyang shook his head thoughtfully. Wait. Is this Mu Tianyang reliable? You won't betray us, right? Hua Yi was surprised. Betray us? Qin Feiyang was stunned and gradually frowned. Frankly speaking, Mu Tianyang might really do such a thing. Chapter 2087. Second floor, resting room. The coffin was still placed at the door. Feng Yuan sat in front of the tea table and said to Mu Tianyang, "Close the door." Close the door? Mu Tianyang felt more and more uneasy. He turned around and closed the door, then stood at the door and looked at Feng Yuan silently. Feng Yuan waved his hand and said, "Don't be so restrained. Come and sit." That's not right. Mu Tianyang was a little hesitant. This old man told you to sit. Sit down quickly. Feng Yuan raised his eyebrows. Yes. Mu Tianyang hurriedly ran to the tea table and sat opposite Feng Yuan, trembling with fear. In fact, he was pretending to be afraid. Although in terms of strength, he was thousands of miles away from Feng Yuan. As an imperial emperor, he was born with courage that ordinary people did not have. Feng Yuan's aura was not enough to suppress him. However, there was a saying that when one was under the eaves, one had to lower one's head. Sometimes, one had to pretend to be weak. Feng Yuan made tea and asked, "Just now, you said that if this old man needs anything, I will tell you, right?" "Yes." Mu Tianyang nodded. It was just a joke. Did he take it seriously? Good. From now on, follow this old man. This old man will guarantee that you will have a meteoric rise in the Empyrean Palace. Feng Yuan said. This, Mu Tianyang's expression went blank. Wasn't this a little too direct? At least be a little more tactful. Feng Yuan said. I don't like to beat around the bush. Mu Tianyang pondered for a while and said, Temple Master, this is a little too sudden. Moreover, I don't think you will trust me. Feng Yuan poured 2 cups of tea. He pushed 1 cup in front of Mu Tianyang and picked up the other cup himself. He placed it at the tip of his nose and sniffed it. Then he took a sip and said, Of course I won't trust you. Then why do you want me to follow you? Mu Tianyang frowned. Don't you know that there is a kind of control secret technique in this world that can control others' lives? Feng Yuan said. You want to control me? Mu Tianyang immediately stood up and glared at Feng Yuan. Feng Yuan said indifferently, Don't be agitated. Sit down. Mu Tianyang didn't sit down. He even wanted to turn around and leave. What a joke. As a god monarch, how could he allow his life to be in the hands of others? I told you to sit down. Didn't you hear me? Feng Yuan's gaze turned cold, and his tone carried a commanding tone. Mu Tianyang raised his eyebrows imperceptibly and returned to his seat. Don't get too worked up. Actually, this old man doesn't want to control you. And this old man has never controlled anyone before. But I'm sure you know that Guiyang's betrayal was a huge blow to this old man. You might not know this, but those who are familiar with this old man know how well this old man treats Guiyang. Not only did I promote and nurture him, I even took care of his family. It can be said that this old man treats him like my own son. But I never expected that he would betray me. Facing this matter, this old man's heart is pained. I also learned from it that apart from family, there is no one in this world that is worthy of trust. Sometimes you can't even trust your family. So you have to understand this old man. Feng Yuan said. Mu Tianyang frowned. I can understand your feelings, but I'm a person who doesn't like being controlled by others. But you have to know that sometimes it's not up to you to choose. But don't worry. After this old man controls you, I won't force you to do anything. Everything depends on your willingness. Of course, if you follow me, we have to be of the same mind. Whether it's my enemy or your enemy, they are all our common enemies. Feng Yuan smiled. This, Mu Tianyang hesitated. A wise man submits to circumstances. There's no harm in following this old man. If you really can't make a decision now, I can give you a few days to consider. Feng Yuan said. Mu Tianyang pondered for a moment and looked up at Feng Yuan. Are you sure you won't force me? Of course. Feng Yuan nodded. Mu Tianyang added. Can you guarantee that I'll have a meteoric rise? I can immediately appoint you as the manager of the resource hall. In other words, apart from me, everyone in the resource hall will have to obey your orders. Feng Yuan said. That's like being above everyone else. Mu Tianyang was slightly tempted. Yes, that's right. Beneath one person and above all others. Feng Yuan nodded. All right. Mu Tianyang clenched his teeth and said, as long as you keep your word, I'll follow you. You're indeed a smart man. Feng Yuan chuckled and performed a hand seal. A black seal the size of a baby's palm was swiftly formed. The seal was a pentagram with a dark glow, emitting an eerie aura. Feng Yuan said, this is the soul-controlling technique, able to control one's god soul. Soul-controlling technique? Mu Tianyang observed the black seal and frowned. I know quite a few soul-controlling techniques. Each of them has their own strengths. May I ask, Hall Master, what's the strength of this soul-controlling technique? The strength of this soul-controlling technique is that after being controlled, I can erase the other party's god soul with just a thought. Feng Yuan said. It's similar to the slave seal. Mu Tianyang mumbled and asked curiously. I've heard of some soul-controlling techniques that can peek into the other party's thoughts and sense the other party's location. There is such a soul-controlling technique. However, such soul-controlling techniques are very rare. From what I've heard, only legendary-level soul-controlling techniques have this ability. Feng Yuan said. What? Only legendary-level soul-controlling techniques have this ability. Does that mean the slave seal is legendary level? Mu Tianyang was secretly shocked. He had not expected the slave seal to be so terrifying. What's wrong? Are you afraid that I'll peek into your inner thoughts? Feng Yuan looked at Mu Tianyang and asked. If I don't do anything wrong, I won't be afraid of ghosts knocking on my door. What am I afraid of? I'm just curious. I also want to see if there's a chance to get such a soul-controlling technique. Mu Tianyang said with a smile. Feng Yuan said, don't even think about it. Even the martial arts treasury doesn't have such a soul-controlling technique. It might not even exist in the entire North region. A trace of disappointment crept onto Mu Tianyang's face. Enough. Relax your mind and don't resist. The process may be a little painful, but it will be over soon. After Feng Yuan finished speaking, he waved his hand, and the black seal turned into a stream of light and entered Mu Tianyang's head. Mu Tianyang's body trembled immediately. His hands stared at the armrest of the chair, and his face was full of pain. However, he did not even make a sound during the entire process. It could be seen that his willpower was not inferior to Qin Fei Yang's. In less than a few breaths, the control was completed. Feng Yuan also smiled. He looked at Mu Tianyang and said, since you have followed me, I won't treat you unfairly. Feng Yuan took out an interspatial ring and threw it to Mu Tianyang. What's this? Mu Tianyang caught the interspatial ring and looked at Feng Yuan suspiciously. Feng Yuan smiled and said, these are the soul stones that I carry with me. There are about 2 to 300 million. 2 to 300 million. Mu Tianyang's eyes trembled. He immediately checked the interspatial ring and was stunned. There were indeed a mountain of soul stones in the interspatial ring. Are they all for me? After a while, Mu Tianyang came back to his senses. He looked up at Feng Yuan and asked in disbelief. Yes. Feng Yuan nodded. Thank you, Temple Master. Mu Tianyang immediately got up and bowed to thank him. Feng Yuan waved his hand and smiled. We're all on the same side. There's no need to be so polite. By the way, I heard you say that you were forced to be with Jiang Haoyan and the others. Why? It's a long story. Actually, Jiang Haoyan and I have known each other for a long time, and we have always been rivals. Mu Tianyang sighed. Then why did Jiang Rishuang call you a heartless man in public when you entered Empyrean Palace? Feng Yuan was suspicious. It's their plan. Since Jiang Haoyan and Feng Zijuan had a conflict in the treasure pavilion, Jiang Haoyan knew that you would not let him go. So he wanted to drag me down with him to share some of the pressure. You've seen his methods. He's extremely scheming. I can't beat him at all. Mu Tianyang sighed deeply. There was a trace of grievance in his expression. I see. Feng Yuan suddenly understood and asked suspiciously, then what's his background? Mu Tianyang said, he's the same as me, born in a small village. However, due to our good talent and luck, we've managed to obtain quite a bit of good fortune. That's why we've slowly reached where we are today. Feng Yuan said meaningfully, your luck isn't an ordinary kind of good. What do you mean? Mu Tianyang was suspicious. When you entered Empyrean Palace for the test, this old man was also observing in the conference hall. Your dagger should be a legendary divine weapon, right? Feng Yuan said. This? Mu Tianyang was a little flustered. Don't worry. Although legendary divine weapons are rare, it's not like this old man doesn't have any. Feng Yuan smiled faintly. What? You also have a legendary divine weapon? Mu Tianyang was shocked. Of course. After all, this old man is a hall master, the ruler of Empyrean Palace. How can I not have a trump card? And not only this old man, Shengguan Fenglan, the 10 great elders, and so on all have terrifying trump cards. Feng Yuan said. Mu Tianyang's face was blank. Waves were rolling in his heart. It seemed that he had underestimated Empyrean Palace. All right then, go and do your work. This old man will arrange for you to be in charge of the resource hall. In the future, you'll be the manager of the resource hall. Feng Yuan smiled. Thank you, hall master, for your help. Mu Tianyang quickly got up and said respectfully. Feng Yuan said, this is just a small benefit. As long as you work hard for this old man, there will be bigger surprises in the future. Yes. Mu Tianyang nodded, but after pondering for a while he said, but hall master, I feel that I shouldn't be in charge of the resource hall for the time being. Why? Feng Yuan looked at him doubtfully. 2 reasons. First, I just came to the resource hall. If I become the manager of the resource hall, the others won't be convinced. Second, Jiang Haotian. A cold light flashed in Mu Tianyang's eyes. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.